When the extravagant birthday party finally ended and the $28,000 bill arrived, my husband shoved the leather check presenter toward me, expecting my black card. I just sat there calmly, pushed it back, and dropped one line. That child was never mine, so why should I pay? His face went deathly pale with panic. My name is Claire. I am 34 years old, and I work as a forensic accountant unearthing financial fraud for a living. Yet the biggest scam I ever uncovered was happening right inside my own family. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a toxic family who saw you as nothing but a bank account. Just put it on your card, Claire. It is a simple deposit. Do not make this a bigger deal than it needs to be. Bradley's voice was slick-coated in that practiced corporate salesman charm he usually reserved for closing deals, not for demanding money from his wife. He tossed the heavy cream-colored invoice onto the glass surface of my home office desk. It slid across the smooth glass and stopped right on top of the quarterly audit reports I was reviewing. The bold gold lettering at the top of the paper read, "The Oakmont Country Club." Below it was a staggering figure. A $15,000 non-refundable deposit for a 5-year-old's birthday party. I did not immediately look up from my dual monitors. As a forensic accountant, my entire career was built on the meticulous, emotionless parsing of data, finding the lies hidden in the margins. I was trained to remain completely impassive when faced with discrepancies. But this was not a corporate ledger. This was my husband standing in my home demanding I finance an absurdly lavish party for my sister's son Leo. $15,000, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I picked up the thick cardstock, feeling the expensive texture between my fingertips. For a 5-year-old. For Penelope's son. Why exactly is this landing on my desk, Bradley? Bradley shifted his weight, crossing his arms over his tailored suit. He always wore suits that were just a fraction too expensive for his actual income bracket, compensating for the fact that his sales commissions had been steadily declining for the past 2 years. "Because we are family, Claire," he said, deploying his favorite weapon, guilt. "Your parents already sent out the formal invitations to Desmond's colleagues at the hospital. Half the pediatric board is coming. Penelope wants it to be perfect. You know how much Leo means to her." "I know how much Leo means to her," I replied, setting the invoice down. "What I do not know is why Penelope and Desmond are not paying for their own child's party. Desmond is a pediatric surgeon. He makes more than enough to cover a bouncy castle and a clown. Penelope overextended the budget on the custom floral arrangements and the imported catering," Bradley said, rolling his eyes as if I were the one being entirely unreasonable. "Desmond put his foot down on the budget. He does not know she upgraded to the platinum package. If he finds out she blew past his limit, they are going to have a massive fight. We are just helping them float the deposit. I will pay you back when my quarterly bonus hits." "No." The word left my mouth sharp and decisive. Bradley's jaw tightened. The charming salesman facade slipped, revealing the entitled, irritable man beneath. "Excuse me." I said, "No, Bradley. I am not financing my sister's vanity project so she can play the perfect wealthy housewife on social media. If she cannot afford the Oakmont, she can host it in a public park like a normal person." "You are so incredibly selfish," he spat, his hand slamming down on the edge of my desk. "You make $200,000 a year, Claire. You sit in this office analyzing spreadsheets and hoarding your cash while your own flesh and blood asks for a simple favor. It is for your only nephew. Are you really that cold?" I slowly took off my blue light glasses and finally looked him dead in the eye. The audacity of his manipulation was breathtaking, but unfortunately it was a dynamic I was entirely used to. In my family, I was the scapegoat, the cold, calculating, unlovable workaholic. Penelope was the golden child, the vibrant, beautiful mother who gave my parents their precious grandchild. I was just the cash machine they expected to dispense money whenever Penelope's lifestyle exceeded her grasp. "I am not cold," I said, rotating my keyboard slightly to the side. "I am observant. And speaking of hoarding cash, Bradley, perhaps you can explain why you need me to cover this deposit when we supposedly have over $80,000 in our joint savings account." Bradley froze. The subtle micro-expressions on his face, the slight widening of his eyes, the rigid set of his shoulders screamed guilt. It was the exact same reaction I saw in embezzlers right before I handed over my audit findings to federal authorities. I do not want to touch the savings, he deflected, quickly running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. The market is volatile. I want to keep our liquidity high. Using your card gives us the points, and like I said, I will pay it off next month. I did not argue. Instead, I moved my mouse, clicked open a new tab on my secure browser, and logged directly into our joint banking portal. I had been meaning to do a routine check of our finances all week, but my caseload at the firm had been overwhelming. Now my professional instincts were screaming like a siren. Let us check our liquidity then, I murmured, watching the dashboard load. As the numbers populated on the screen, the air in the room seemed to evaporate. The balance in our joint high-yield savings account, an account we had built together over the last 4 years to purchase a vacation property, was not $80,000. It was $39,412. More than $40,000 had simply vanished. "Where is it, Bradley?" I asked, my voice dropping an octave. I did not yell. I did not scream. The sheer magnitude of the missing funds required absolute terrifying calm. Bradley took a step back from the desk. "Claire, listen. I made a few investments. Some high-risk, high-reward crypto portfolios. My buddy at the firm tipped me off and I had to move fast. I did not want to worry you because you are so incredibly risk-averse. You transferred $40,000 of our shared assets without consulting me into crypto." I clicked rapidly, pulling up the transaction history. The money had not moved in one lump sum. It had bled out slowly. 2,000 here, 5,000 there, over the course of the last 6 months. That was not a sudden crypto investment. That was a sustained, calculated drain. "It is tied up right now," he lied smoothly, though a bead of sweat was forming at his temple. "It will bounce back. You just need to trust me. But right now, we need to deal with this invoice. Your parents have already told the entire country club board that you are sponsoring the event as a gift. If you do not pay this today, Oakmont cancels the reservation. You are going to humiliate your parents and break Leo's heart. Are you really going to destroy this family over money?" "Get out of my office," I said, staring at the screen. "Claire, please just listen to reason." I said, "Get out of my office, Bradley." He sneered, his true nature fully exposing itself. "You prepare that card, Claire. Your parents are coming over for dinner tomorrow night, and if this is not paid, you get to look your father in the eye and tell him why you are a miserable, selfish disappointment." He turned on his heel and slammed the office door behind him, the sound echoing through the house. I sat in the silence, the $15,000 Oakmont invoice sitting next to my keyboard. He thought the threat of my parents' disappointment would break me. He thought my fear of family conflict would force me to swipe my card and bury my head in the sand. He severely underestimated who he was married to. I cracked my knuckles, pulled up my forensic accounting software, and began to follow the money. The house was dead silent save for the rhythmic, aggressive clicking of my mouse. I had locked the door to my home office. To anyone else, a missing $40,000 disguised as a bad investment might seem like a tragic but plausible marital dispute. To a forensic accountant, who spent her days dismantling corporate fraud rings, it was a trail of breadcrumbs leading straight to a slaughterhouse. Bradley was a salesman, not a financial mastermind. His attempts to hide his tracks were laughable. I started by isolating every withdrawal from our joint savings over the past 6 months. He had used wire transfers to route the funds into a secondary checking account at a different bank, but Bradley, in his arrogance, had linked that secondary account to our shared tax preparation software last year and forgotten to unlink it. With 3 clicks, I bypassed his passwords and stared at the raw transaction ledger of his private account. I pulled up a blank spreadsheet on my right monitor and began categorizing the expenses, my eyes scanning the data with clinical precision. If he was truly investing in crypto or high-risk stocks, I would certainly see wire transfers to exchanges. I would see brokerage deposits. There were 0 investment transactions. Instead, I saw a pattern of localized, highly specific spending that made my blood run ice cold. Transaction 1 was $4,200 at a luxury department store. Transaction 2 was $1,500 at a high-end spa. Transaction 3 was $3,800 to a credit card services company. I frowned, cross-referencing the dates. The luxury department store charge occurred on October 14th. I closed my eyes, accessing my terrifyingly accurate memory for dates and family events. October 16th was Penelope's birthday. On that day, she had flaunted a brand new limited edition designer handbag, claiming her husband Desmond had surprised her with it. Desmond, a genuine African-American pediatrician, had smiled, looking happy. His wife was thrilled. He thought he paid for it from their joint account. He had no idea the bag was funded by my husband. I moved to the credit card payment. I accessed Bradley's email, which used our old anniversary as the password, and searched for the credit card company. I found the payment confirmation. The last 4 digits did not match any of Bradley's cards. I ran a quick soft inquiry search using tools available to me through my firm's database. The card belonged to Penelope. My husband was paying off my sister's credit card debt. A heavy, suffocating weight settled onto my chest. My mind immediately tried to rationalize it. Perhaps Penelope was in financial trouble, and Bradley was helping her out in secret. My sister was notorious for living beyond her means. She needed to portray the image of the ultra-wealthy, effortless stay-at-home mom to her social media followers. Desmond provided a fantastic living, but even a doctor's salary could not sustain Penelope's relentless appetite for luxury without debt. But why hide it from me? Why root it through a secret account? And why the other charges? Why the constant flow of cash from my hard-earned savings to support my sister's vanity? I kept scrolling down the ledger. Then I found the rhythmic, recurring anomaly. It was the kind of pattern that made auditors sit up straight. Every single Thursday, almost without fail, there was a charge for $350 to the Grand Marquis, an upscale boutique hotel located roughly halfway between Bradley's corporate office and Penelope's suburban home. Every Thursday. For 6 months. No, I adjusted the date parameters on the bank ledger, extending the search back a year. Then 2 years. Then 3. The Thursday charges at the Grand Marquis went back exactly 5 years and 8 months. I stopped breathing. The air conditioning in the room suddenly felt like a freezer. 5 years and 8 months ago. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, staring blankly at the ceiling, as my mind began to automatically correlate timelines overlaying family history onto financial data. 5 years and 8 months ago, Penelope and Desmond had been going through a devastating rough patch. They had been trying to conceive a child for nearly 2 years without success. Desmond had confided in me once, during a rare moment of vulnerability at a family barbecue, that the fertility struggles were breaking Penelope. She was becoming erratic, depressed, and deeply resentful of anyone around her who was pregnant. As a loving husband, Desmond took on all the blame, trying everything to give his wife the family she wanted. Then suddenly Penelope announced she was pregnant. A miracle, my mother Diane had called it. The whole family wept with joy. Desmond had been the happiest I had ever seen him, treating Penelope like fragile glass for the entire 9 months until little Leo was born. Leo just turned 5. Add the 9 months of pregnancy, and the timeline matched perfectly. The Thursday afternoon hotel charges began exactly 1 month before Penelope announced her miracle pregnancy. "No," I whispered aloud to the empty room. My hands began to shake, a physical reaction betraying my mental discipline. No, that is insane. That is just a coincidence. But the data was staring back at me. Numbers do not lie. Numbers do not care about family loyalty, they do not care about love, and they do not care about destroying lives. I stared at the screen, letting the horrific reality wash over me. The missing $40,000 was not an investment gone wrong. It was the operating budget for a 6-year betrayal. My husband and my sister were carrying on a long-term affair. They were meeting every Thursday at a boutique hotel. Bradley was financing her lavish lifestyle, covering the gaps her husband Desmond could not or would not fill. And the timeline of their weekly hotel rendezvous pointed to a truth so monstrous it threatened to break my sanity. The demand for $15,000 for Leo's birthday party was not just an uncle indulging his nephew. It was a father secretly providing for his son. I needed to dig deeper to find the absolute undeniable proof that would burn their charade to the ground. I needed to check her medical records and confirm exactly what kind of miracle that pregnancy really was. The numbers had shown me the betrayal. Now I needed the exact science to show me the true biology. I needed more proof. A hotel charge was highly suspicious and entirely damning for Bradley's fidelity. But I needed absolute confirmation before I detonated a nuclear bomb in the middle of my entire family. I turned back to the computer, my grief instantly converting into raw, calculated adrenaline. I opened a new search window and accessed my firm's premium investigative background tools. I ran a detailed pull on Penelope's medical expense history, targeting the year before Leo was born. It took me 45 minutes to crack through the layers, tracing payments from Desmond's accounts to various specialists. And there it was. A massive $15,000 payment to a fertility and genetics center. I needed to see what that payment was for. I was legally barred from viewing her protected medical records, but I was not barred from looking at Desmond's open financial disclosures. He had filed a medical insurance application a few years ago, requiring him to list significant out-of-pocket medical liabilities. I found the summary attached to public court filings. The $15,000 was not for fertility treatments for Penelope, it was for Desmond. He had undergone a complex, highly specialized microscopic surgery to address severe male factor infertility. The records indicated that the surgery had been largely unsuccessful. Desmond's sperm count had been virtually non-existent. The clinic had recommended donor sperm as their only viable path to conception. But Penelope had not used a donor. 2 months after Desmond's failed surgery, she miraculously got pregnant naturally. The family had praised the heavens. Desmond had called it the greatest blessing of his life. I stared at the screen, a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach. The Thursday hotel charges, the credit card payoffs, the designer gifts, the demand for $15,000 for Leo's birthday party, the aggressive, desperate way Bradley had tried to force me to pay for it. Leo was not a miracle. Leo was Bradley's son. The magnitude of the betrayal hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath completely out of my lungs. I sat frozen in the glow of my monitors, the digital evidence burning itself into my retinas. My husband, my sister. For 6 years they had been carrying out an affair right under my nose, right under Desmond's nose, and they had produced a child that the entire family adored, a child that I, the supposedly cold and selfish aunt, was currently being manipulated into financing. I pushed my chair back and splashed freezing water on my face. The reflection staring back at me was pale and haunted, but beneath the shock, a fierce, icy anger was rapidly solidifying. I was not the type of woman to collapse in a heap and weep. I dismantled empires built on lies for a living. If my family thought they could construct a massive, fraudulent reality and force me to foot the bill, they were about to experience the most ruthless audit of their lives. I walked back to my desk, my mind shifting into an operational gear that was entirely devoid of emotion. I needed to document everything. I spent the next hour systematically downloading, screenshotting, and encrypting every piece of financial data I had uncovered. The hotel receipts, the credit card payments, the wire transfers from our joint savings to Bradley's secret account. I created a secure cloud-based dossier completely inaccessible to anyone but myself. Then I turned my attention to the upcoming birthday party. If Leo was Bradley's son, why was Penelope throwing such an outrageously expensive party, and why were they forcing me to pay for it? I hacked back into Bradley's phone backups. He synced his text messages to our shared cloud storage, assuming I never checked it. I ran a search for Penelope's number. The text thread between them was extensive, but they were careful. They used coded language referring to our Thursday meetings and the package. But the messages from the past 48 hours were chaotic and desperate. Penelope wrote, "Desmond is furious about the country club quote. He saw the preliminary estimate and threatened to cancel the whole thing. He said we cannot afford it with his student loans still pending. You need to fix this, Brad. It is his 5th birthday. It has to be perfect." Bradley replied, "I am handling it. I told you I lost the 40 grand in that crypto crash. I am completely tapped out. I cannot cover it right now." Penelope fired back. I do not care about your crypto. If Desmond cancels the party, my entire social circle will know we are broke. Make Claire pay for it. She has the black card. Guilt trip her. Tell my parents to pressure her. She will cave, she always does when mom gets involved. Bradley responded, I am working on it. She is being a stubborn witch about the deposit. Penelope sent one final chilling text. Make her do it, Bradley, or I swear I will tell Desmond the truth about why Leo has your eye color. I have nothing to lose. I sat back reading that last text over and over again. I will tell Desmond the truth about why Leo has your eye color. It was blackmail. Penelope was leveraging the secret of Leo's paternity to force Bradley to finance her extravagant lifestyle. Because Bradley had lost his stolen stash of cash in a stupid gamble, he was trying to use my money to pay the ransom. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it made me want to laugh, a sharp, humorless sound that echoed in the quiet room. They were not just betraying me, they were actively treating me like a disposable resource to maintain their web of lies. And Penelope was fully prepared to destroy her own husband Desmond, a man who worked 80-hour weeks at the pediatric ward and loved Leo with his entire soul just to maintain her status at the country club. I looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Bradley had not returned home. He was likely staying at a hotel or out drinking, punishing me with his absence, expecting me to be pacing the floor in anxiety, ready to apologize and hand over my credit card the moment he walked through the door. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed my parents' house. My mother Diane answered on the third ring, her tone instantly sharp and defensive. Claire, do you have any idea what time it is? Bradley called us earlier. He was extremely upset. I cannot believe you are being this selfish about your nephew's birthday. Mom, I said, keeping my voice perfectly flat, I need you and Dad to come to my house tomorrow morning at 9. It is an absolute emergency. It concerns Penelope, Bradley, and Leo. What are you talking about? She huffed, annoyance dripping from every syllable. We are busy tomorrow. We have a brunch with the country club committee to finalize the menu for Leo's party. If you are calling to argue about the deposit, save your breath. You make more than enough money, Claire. It is time you started acting like a supportive sister instead of a stingy spinster. I know that Leo is Bradley's son, I said. The silence on the other end of the line was instantaneous and profound. The background noise of the television abruptly cut off. What did you just say? Diane whispered, her voice stripped of all its usual bravado. I know about the affair. I know about the hotel every Thursday for the last 6 years. And I know Desmond is sterile. I have the financial and medical documentation to prove all of it. Be at my house at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Mom. Or I will drive directly to Desmond's hospital and hand the file to him during his morning rounds. I hung up the phone and placed it face down on the desk. The board was set. I had the evidence. Now it was time to see if my parents possessed even a shred of morality or if the rot in this family went all the way to the roots. I sat in the chilling silence of my home office, the digital clock on my secondary monitor flipping to 2 in the morning. My phone lay face down, exactly where I had left it after hanging up on my mother. The adrenaline that had fueled my initial discovery was beginning to harden into a cold mechanical focus. Knowing the truth was one thing. Proving it to a family of pathological liars required an entirely different level of preparation. They would try to gaslight me. They would claim the hotel receipts were for business meetings. They would say the credit card payoffs were innocent loans. I needed the biological timeline to be absolutely bulletproof. I needed the fertility clinic bill. I turned my attention back to the encrypted database. I had seen the surface-level transaction of $15,000 routed to a fertility and genetics center, but I needed the itemized invoice. Desmond was a meticulous pediatrician, and I knew he kept digital backups of his tax returns and medical malpractice insurance disclosures on a shared cloud drive he occasionally used for family photo albums. He had given me guest access years ago to download pictures from a Thanksgiving dinner. He never revoked my permissions. I navigated to the cloud drive and bypassed the basic directory structure. Desmond was organized, but he lacked the paranoia required to hide documents from a forensic accountant. Within 10 minutes, I located a folder labeled Medical Expenses Tax Deductions. I opened the file containing the fertility clinic invoice. The document loaded on my screen detailing every agonizing step of Desmond and Penelope's journey to conceive. The first page listed routine consultations and hormone panels. The second page was the devastating one. It detailed a complex, microscopic surgery designed to extract viable sperm from Desmond following a diagnosis of severe irreversible sterility. The procedure had failed. The clinical notes attached to the billing code were brutal in their finality. Zero viable count. Donor intervention required. I printed the document, the printer whirring to life in the quiet room. I grabbed a red highlighter and marked the date of Desmond's failed procedure, February 12th. Then I pulled up the spreadsheet where I had cataloged Bradley's secret hotel charges. I cross-referenced the dates. Throughout January and February, the Thursday charges at the Grand Marquis had been consistent. But on March 14th, exactly 1 month after Desmond received his devastating diagnosis, there was a charge for an upgraded suite and room service. 2 weeks after that upgraded suite charge, Penelope announced she was pregnant. The sheer psychological violence of their timeline made my stomach churn. I remembered the exact dinner party where she made the announcement. We were all gathered at my parents' house. Penelope had stood up, clinking her glass with a spoon, tears streaming down her perfectly contoured face. She talked about miracles. She talked about how heaven had finally answered their prayers when all hope seemed lost. Desmond had wept openly, burying his face in his hands, overwhelmed with gratitude. And Bradley, my husband, had sat across the table, raising his glass in a toast to the happy couple. He had looked at Penelope with a secret, smug satisfaction that I had mistaken for brotherly pride. They had sat there eating my parents' food, accepting Desmond's adoration, and mocking all of us in plain sight. They had turned a good man's medical tragedy into a convenient cover story for their affair. I printed the hotel ledger and placed it next to the fertility clinic bill. The narrative was undeniable. Desmond was medically incapable of fathering a child. Penelope refused to use a donor because a donor required clinical records and legal paperwork that would ruin her image of natural perfection. Instead, she used my husband. She used Bradley to secure her status as a mother, ensuring Desmond would remain tied to her forever, while Bradley funded her luxury habits on the side. I spent the next few hours compiling everything into a single sterile binder. I called it the Leo dossier. I organized the documents chronologically. First, the vanishing $40,000 from our joint savings. Next, the credit card payoffs for designer goods. Then the unbroken 5-year chain of Thursday hotel receipts. Finally, the devastating medical billing records that proved Desmond's sterility right next to the timeline of Leo's conception. I placed the invoice for the $15,000 Oakmont Country Club birthday party right on top. The audacity of that single piece of paper was staggering. Bradley was practically bankrupt from funding his secret family. He had lost his stolen cash, and Penelope was threatening to expose him to Desmond if he did not pay for the party. So he tried to bully me, the betrayed wife, into financing a lavish celebration for the child he created with my sister. The sun began to rise, casting a pale gray light through the office blinds. I had not slept for a single second, but I felt no fatigue. I felt entirely weaponized. I took a quick shower, changing into a sharp, tailored navy suit. I applied my makeup with careful precision, ensuring I looked exactly like the ruthless professional I was. I wanted my parents to see the forensic accountant, not the compliant daughter they were used to manipulating. At 8:30, I walked down to the kitchen and brewed a strong pot of coffee. The house was spotless, silent, and waiting. I set the Leo dossier on the center of the kitchen island. I poured myself a mug of black coffee and stood by the window watching the driveway. My parents, Gregory and Diane, were obsessed with punctuality when they believed they were in a position of power. They thought they were coming here to scold a jealous, bitter woman. They thought they were going to demand I swipe my black card to protect the family image. At exactly 8:58, a sleek silver Mercedes turned onto my street and pulled into the driveway. My mother stepped out first, clutching her designer handbag, her face already set in a mask of severe disapproval. My father followed, looking irritated at the inconvenience of having to discipline his scapegoat daughter so early in the morning. I took a sip of my coffee, the hot liquid grounding me in the present moment. I walked to the front door and unlocked it, swinging it open just as my mother raised her fist to knock. The battle lines were drawn. The evidence was secured. It was time to watch the facade burn. "Claire, your phone call last night was entirely uncalled for," Diane snapped, stepping past me into the foyer. She did not offer a greeting or a hug. She simply marched straight toward the living room, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. "We have a very busy schedule today, and your refusal to handle a simple deposit is putting unnecessary stress on your sister." Gregory shut the front door behind him, fixing me with a stern, exhausted glare. "Your mother is right, Claire. We are not here to play games. Bradley called me last night in a panic. He said you were holding the Oakmont reservation hostage over some petty financial disagreement. We expect you to act like an adult and support your family." I closed the door, silently ignoring the familiar sting of their immediate invalidation. For my entire life, their default setting had been to assume I was in the wrong. I walked past them, guiding them toward the kitchen rather than the living room. The kitchen island was cold, hard marble, much like the conversation we were about to have. "I am not playing games, Dad," I said, taking my place behind the island. The Leo dossier sat exactly where I had left it, a thick black binder resting ominously on the white stone. "And I am not holding anything hostage. I asked you both here because I uncovered something last night that you need to see. Something that fundamentally alters this entire family." Diane rolled her eyes, placing her designer handbag on a bar stool. "If this is about Bradley making a bad investment, he already explained it to us. Men make financial mistakes, Claire. You make too much money anyway. Punishing him and your nephew by ruining a birthday party is incredibly vindictive." "It was not a bad investment," I said, my voice dropping to that cold forensic register I used in boardrooms. I flipped open the heavy cover of the binder. "I am a fraud investigator, Mom. I trace stolen assets for federal cases. Did you really think Bradley could hide a systematic drain of $40,000 from our joint accounts without me finding out?" Gregory crossed his arms, his posture defensive. "Marital finances are between you and your husband. We are here about Leo's party." "Leo's party is directly funded by my marital finances," I shot back, sliding the first page across the marble. It was the spreadsheet detailing the credit card payoffs. Bradley did not lose $40,000 in crypto. He spent it paying off Penelope's secret credit card debt. He spent it buying her luxury goods from high-end department stores. Diane stared at the paper, her perfectly penciled eyebrows drawing together in confusion. "What are you talking about? Desmond buys Penelope those things. Desmond is a very successful surgeon. Desmond is paying for the mortgage and the cars." I corrected her, tapping the paper. "Bradley is funding her hidden lifestyle. But that is just the beginning." I turned the page and slid the next document toward them. It was a highlighted ledger of the hotel charges. "Every Thursday afternoon for the past 6 years, Bradley has booked a luxury suite at the Grand Marquis. It is conveniently located exactly halfway between his corporate office and Penelope's house." My father stepped closer to the island, looking down at the rows of highlighted dates. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out his reading glasses, slipping them onto his face. The kitchen was deathly quiet. I watched my parents process the data. I watched them try to find a loophole, an excuse, a misunderstanding. "This proves nothing," Diane said, her voice tight. "Bradley travels for work. He has clients. Penelope has her own social engagements. You are jumping to disgusting paranoid conclusions because you have always been jealous of your sister." "I expected you to say that," I replied smoothly, "which is why I pulled the final piece of the puzzle." I flipped to the third section of the binder. I placed the medical billing record directly in front of my father. I watched his eyes scan the clinical terminology. 5 years and 8 months ago, Desmond underwent a microscopic surgery to treat severe male factor infertility. I explained, enunciating every single word so they could not pretend to misunderstand. "The procedure failed. Desmond is completely, irreversibly sterile. His sperm count is 0. The clinic informed them that a donor was their only option for conception." Diane let out a sharp breath, gripping the edge of the marble counter. 2 months after that failed surgery, I continued my voice steady despite the adrenaline pounding in my ears. Penelope announced her miracle pregnancy. The timeline of Leo's conception aligns perfectly with the Thursday afternoon hotel bookings at the Grand Marquis. Bradley is Leo's biological father. I stood there, my hands resting flat on the kitchen island, and waited. In my heart, the fragile, wounded child inside me expected this to be the turning point. I expected my mother to cover her mouth in horror and burst into tears, realizing that her golden child had committed an unforgivable atrocity against me. I expected my father to slam his fist on the table, outraged that his son-in-law had violated his daughter and hijacked his family tree. I expected them to wrap their arms around me, to apologize for calling me jealous, to vow that they would protect me, and expose Penelope's vile actions to Desmond. I waited for the protective fury of parents who had just learned their daughter's life had been a lie for 6 years. I waited for them to realize I was the victim here, the one who had been stolen from, lied to, and manipulated. Instead, a heavy, suffocating silence stretched across the kitchen. My father slowly took off his reading glasses, folding them with meticulous care and placing them back into his breast pocket. He did not look angry. He did not look shocked. My mother stared at the medical record, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She looked up from the paper and her eyes met mine. There were no tears of sympathy. There was no horror. There was only a cold, calculating evaluation that made my blood run absolutely freezing. "Where did you get these medical records?" Diane asked, her voice completely devoid of emotion. Not "how could Penelope do this?" Not "oh my God, Claire, I am so sorry." "Where did you get these records?" The ground beneath my feet seemed to vanish. I looked at my father, who was now staring at me with an expression of profound irritation. The pieces of a much darker, much more sinister puzzle began to snap into place in my mind. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. They were not shocked because this was not new information to them. They already knew. "You knew," I whispered, the realization stealing the oxygen from the room. I looked back and forth between the two people who had raised me. The polished facade of my childhood crumbled right before my eyes. "You both knew about this. How long?" Diane crossed her arms, avoiding my direct gaze, but standing her ground. Her designer handbag sat on the stool, a stark reminder of her priorities. "Claire, you are invading people's private medical histories. Accessing Desmond's files is a federal offense. You could lose your license for this. You are letting your emotions cloud your professional judgment." "Do not deflect," I said, stepping around the marble island to close the physical distance between us. The cool stone against my hip grounded me. "How long have you known that your favorite daughter was sleeping with my husband? How long have you known that Leo is Bradley's son?" Gregory sighed heavily, rubbing the back of his neck as if dealing with a petulant toddler who refused to nap. "We did not know for sure until a few years ago. Penelope came to your mother in tears when Leo started developing certain features. She was terrified. She made a terrible mistake during a very dark period in her marriage. Desmond was depressed about his sterility and pushing her away. Bradley was simply there as a shoulder to cry on, and things went too far. It was a one-time lapse in judgment." "A one-time lapse," I repeated, my voice echoing off the high ceilings of the kitchen. "I just showed you 5.5 years of weekly hotel receipts, Dad. That is not a lapse in judgment. That is a second marriage operating right under your noses." "You were never home, Claire," Diane snapped, suddenly going on the offensive. The speed at which she weaponized my own trauma against me was breathtaking. "You were always at the firm, working 80-hour weeks, flying across the country for your audits. Bradley is a man who needs affection and attention. You iced him out. Penelope was vulnerable and hurting, and you were completely absent. You drove him right into her arms." The sheer velocity of the gaslighting hit me like a physical assault. My own mother was standing in my kitchen, blaming my career for my husband's decision to impregnate my sister. I had built that career to secure our future, to pay for the very house we were standing in, while Bradley squandered his commissions on luxury cars and apparently boutique hotel rooms. "So it is my fault," I said, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. "I worked too hard, so my husband had to sleep with my sister." That is the narrative we are going with to protect your precious Penelope. No one is saying it is entirely your fault. Gregory intervened using his mediator voice, the one he used to negotiate country club membership fees. We are saying you need to look at the bigger picture. Desmond is a highly respected pediatric surgeon. He provides an exceptional life for your sister. He is funding your parents' retirement investments and keeping our social standing intact. He adores Leo. He is a good father. If you blow this up, you destroy a good man's life and you destroy this family's foundation. You are worried about Desmond's life? I asked incredulously. Or are you worried about losing your country club status? Are you worried that Penelope will be exposed as a fraud and divorced, leaving you to foot the bill for her designer lifestyle because Bradley certainly cannot afford it? Keep your voice down, Diane hissed, looking nervously toward the windows as if the neighbors could hear us through the double-paned glass. Desmond loves that boy. Leo is an innocent child who deserves a stable home. If you tell Desmond the truth, he will divorce Penelope and fight for full custody, or worse, he will walk away completely. Penelope would be ruined. She would be a pariah in our social circle. She would have absolutely nothing. And what about me? I asked. The question hung in the air, raw and bleeding. I stripped away the forensic accountant persona for a fraction of a second, exposing the daughter who just wanted to be loved. What about my life? My marriage is a lie. My husband stole my savings to fund his secret family. Does my life matter at all to you? Diane looked at me, and for a fleeting moment I thought I saw a crack in her armor. But it instantly resealed, replaced by a look of sheer, hardened pragmatism. You are strong, Claire. You have your career, you have your money, and your independence. You will bounce back from a divorce. Penelope is fragile. She needs Desmond. She needs the stability he provides. You cannot take that away from her just to satisfy your own vindictive need for revenge. I stared at the woman who had given birth to me. The depth of her moral bankruptcy was bottomless. She was actively asking me to swallow the ultimate betrayal, to smile and nod while my husband played father to my sister's child, all to preserve their social standing and Desmond's bank account. They had commodified my pain, weighing it against Penelope's comfort, and decided I was the acceptable sacrifice. I am not keeping this secret, I said, my voice hardening back into diamond. I am going to divorce Bradley. I am going to sue him for every cent of the stolen funds. And I am going to hand this entire binder to Desmond. He deserves to know that his entire marriage is a parasitic lie. You will do no such thing, Gregory barked, taking a threatening step toward me, his face flushed with anger. Watch me, I challenged, tilting my chin up, refusing to back down an inch. I will drive to the hospital right now. You think I care about your country club reputation? You think I care about Penelope being ruined? She ruined herself the day she spread her legs for my husband. The strike was so fast I did not even see it coming. A sharp cracking sound echoed through the kitchen. My head snapped to the side, my cheek burning with sudden intense heat. The force of the slap sent me stumbling backward against the marble island, my hand flying up to cover my face. I tasted copper in my mouth, where my teeth had bitten into the inside of my cheek. I slowly turned my head back. Diane stood there, her chest heaving, her hands still raised in the air, hovering, trembling slightly from the impact. "Do not you ever speak about your sister that way," Diane snarled, her face contorted with a vicious protective rage that she had never once displayed for me. "She made a mistake, but she is a good mother. You are a cold, barren witch who wants to destroy a child's family because you are incapable of keeping a man happy." The silence that followed was absolute. The ringing in my ears faded, leaving behind a crystalline clarity. The slap did not break me. It liberated me. The final microscopic thread tying me to these people snapped permanently. There was no going back. There was no reconciliation. There was only the war they had just declared. The metallic tang of blood pooled in the corner of my mouth. I kept my hand pressed against my burning cheek, my eyes locked on Diane's face. The woman who had given birth to me had just struck me to protect the sister who had slept with my husband. I slowly shifted my gaze to my father, expecting at least a flicker of paternal instinct, a reprimand for his wife's violence. Gregory did not flinch. He stood tall, his expensive polo shirt stretched tight across his chest, looking down at me with the calculating gaze of a man preparing to neutralize a corporate threat. He stepped out from behind the marble island, invading my personal space, towering over me. "Listen to me very carefully," Claire Gregory said, his voice dropping into a lethal quiet register. "You have built a nice little life for yourself. You are a senior forensic accountant. You are on track to make partner. You value your reputation in the financial district above all else. But you seem to forget who introduced you to the senior partners at your firm." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face entirely still. My father was a wealthy commercial real estate developer. He played golf with the managing partners of my accounting firm every other weekend. He knew my bosses. He knew my clients. If you say a single word to Desmond Gregory, continued stepping even closer until I could smell the sharp, expensive mint of his aftershave, if you try to blow up Penelope's marriage with this fabricated paranoid delusion, I will destroy your career before the sun sets today. I will call the executives at your firm. I will tell them that my daughter is suffering a severe psychotic mental breakdown. I will tell them you are fabricating financial documents out of a hysterical jealousy because Bradley is leaving you. Who do you think they will believe? The established real estate mogul who brings them millions in billable hours? Or the hysterical barren woman trying to ruin her sister's family? The threat was not an empty boast. The financial sector was a tight conservative boys' club. Reputation was currency. If my own father launched a smear campaign questioning my sanity and my ethical handling of documents, I would be put on administrative leave immediately. They would launch an internal investigation. I could lose my CPA license. I could lose everything I had spent a decade building. "You would ruin my career to protect her affair?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, testing the absolute limits of his depravity. "I will do whatever it takes to protect this family from your vindictive sabotage," Gregory stated without a shred of hesitation. Desmond's surgical practice is merging with a massive hospital network next month. He is about to become the chief of pediatric surgery. Penelope and Leo are secured for life. I will not let you drag our family name through the mud and jeopardize that kind of wealth and stability because you cannot keep your husband satisfied. Diane stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with my father, a united front of absolute cruelty. "You are completely alone in this, Claire. No one will take your side. Bradley wants a divorce. We will back him. We will testify that you have been emotionally unstable and financially controlling. We will ensure he gets half of everything you own. You will have no husband, no family, and no career." She reached out and snatched the Leo dossier off the marble counter, clutching the binder to her chest. "Here is what is going to happen," Diane dictated, her voice dripping with venom. "You are going to take your card to the Oakmont Country Club this afternoon, and you are going to pay the $15,000 deposit for Leo's birthday party. You are going to attend the party next week. You are going to smile, you are going to mingle with Desmond's colleagues, and you are going to play the role of the generous, loving aunt. You will not say a word about hotel rooms, fertility clinics, or DNA. And if I refuse, I ask testing the cage they had just dropped over me." "Then you lose everything," Gregory answered simply. "We will completely isolate you. We will freeze you out of this family, destroy your professional reputation, and fund Bradley's divorce attorneys until you are bankrupt. You think you are smart because you can read a bank statement, Claire, but you do not know how the real world works. We have the power. You are entirely alone." I stood motionless in my kitchen, the stinging in my cheek throbbing in time with my pulse. The word echoed in my mind: alone. For 34 years, I had craved their validation. I had chased high grades, landed the prestigious job, bought the beautiful house, all to prove I was worthy of the love they showered effortlessly upon Penelope. But staring into their cold, ruthless eyes, the illusion finally shattered completely. They had never loved me. They viewed me as a utility, a tool to be used, an asset to be managed, and when the asset became a liability, they were perfectly willing to liquidate it. I was entirely alone. But as the realization washed over me, it did not bring the crushing despair they expected. Instead, It brought a strange, crystalline liberation. If I had no family to lose, I had nothing left to protect. If I was truly alone, then I was completely untethered from their rules, their expectations, and their toxic social hierarchy. They thought threatening to isolate me was their ultimate weapon. They did not realize they had just handed me the keys to my own cage. But I could not fight them right now. Gregory was right about one thing: he had the connections to tie me up in professional investigations if he moved first. If I fought them in the kitchen, they would call Bradley, they would spin the narrative, and they would strike before I could secure my assets. I needed time. I needed to move in the shadows. I needed them to believe they had won. I forced my shoulders to slump. I let my breathing hitch, summoning the exact image of a broken, defeated woman. I looked down at the marble countertop, avoiding their victorious gazes. "Okay," I whispered, injecting a slight tremor into my voice. "Excuse me," Diane asked, leaning in to relish her victory. I said okay, I repeated, wrapping my arms around my torso as if trying to hold myself together. "I will pay the deposit. I will come to the party. Just please do not call my firm. Please do not ruin my career. It is all I have left." Gregory nodded, a smug, satisfied smile spreading across his face. "That is a smart decision, Claire. I am glad you decided to be reasonable." Diane scoffed, turning toward the front door with the binder tucked under her arm. "Make sure you call the Oakmont before noon, and fix your makeup, you look like a mess." I watched them walk out of my house, the heavy front door clicking shut behind them. I listened to the engine of their car roar to life and fade down the street. I stood alone in the silence of my kitchen. Then I slowly lowered my arms, my posture straightening, the defeated tremor vanishing instantly from my body. I walked over to the sink, rinsed the blood from my mouth, and smiled at my reflection in the window. They thought they had taken my only copy of the evidence. They did not know everything was already encrypted in the cloud. They thought they had backed me into a corner. They did not realize they had just stepped onto a landmine. I had 1 week until the party, 1 week to orchestrate the most devastating, inescapable financial and personal ruin they could ever imagine. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for the most ruthless divorce attorney in the state. The war was officially on. The line rang twice before a crisp professional voice answered. I explained my situation quickly, leaving out the emotional weight and delivering pure, unadulterated facts. My attorney, the managing partner of the top family law firm in the city, listened without interrupting. When I finished detailing the missing $40,000, the hotel receipts, and the undeniable timeline of the medical records, she let out a low whistle. She told me to lock down my credit immediately. She instructed me to open a new individual account at a completely different banking institution and funnel my upcoming commission and payroll checks there. As for the stolen funds, she explained that marital dissipation of assets is a massive factor, even in a no-fault state. I hung up the phone feeling a cold, tactical clarity. I had a comprehensive checklist. I had a firm deadline. The sound of the front door unlocking echoed through the hallway at 8 o'clock that evening. Bradley stepped inside, shrugging off his suit jacket with a theatrical sigh. He carried the distinct scent of expensive scotch and the faint, sweet smell of Penelope's signature floral perfume. He had obviously gone straight to her house after work to celebrate their supposed victory. He strolled into the kitchen, found me washing a coffee mug at the sink, and leaned against the doorframe. He looked incredibly smug, wearing the arrogant smile of a man who believed he had successfully cornered his prey. "I hear you had a productive morning with your parents," he said, pouring himself a glass of sparkling water. "Your mother called me. She said you finally agreed to stop being unreasonable and pay the deposit for the country club. I am glad you decided to act like an adult, Claire. It saves us a lot of unnecessary drama." I kept my back to him, gripping the edge of the sink tightly to prevent my hands from shaking. "Yes," I replied, keeping my voice subdued and hollow. "I will take care of the Oakmont invoice tomorrow morning." "Good," he said, walking over and standing right behind me. "But we need to have a serious conversation about your behavior today. What you did snooping through my private transactions and making wild accusations about my crypto investments was completely unacceptable. You crossed a line, Claire. You violated my trust." The sheer audacity of his words almost made me laugh out loud. He was lecturing me about trust while he smelled like my sister. I turned around, forcing my eyes to widen in a display of manufactured anxiety. I was just worried about the savings, Bradley. $40,000 is a lot of money to move without telling me. It is my money too, he snapped, stepping closer using his physical size to intimidate me. And let us get one thing straight right now. If you ever pull a stunt like that again, if you ever try to control my finances or lock me out of our accounts, I will leave you. And I will not leave quietly. He leaned against the marble island, the exact spot where my father had threatened my career hours earlier. They were all playing from the exact same playbook of intimidation. Do you know how a divorce works in this state, Claire? He asked, swirling the water in his glass. We live in a no-fault state. That means if I file for divorce, it does not matter who did what. It does not matter if we argue. The courts just split everything right down the middle, everything you have worked so hard to hoard. I stared at him, playing the role of the terrified, clueless wife perfectly. What do you mean? I asked softly. I mean, I will take half of this house, he said, gesturing around the renovated kitchen. I will force a sale if you cannot buy me out. I will take half of your massive retirement accounts. I will take half of your investment portfolios. And because you make $200,000 a year and my commissions have been down, you will be paying me alimony. You will be writing me a hefty check every single month just to maintain the lifestyle I have grown accustomed to during our marriage. That is the law, Claire. You earn more, so you pay more. You will work yourself into the ground to keep me comfortable. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his water, watching my reaction. He wanted to see fear. He wanted to see the independent, high-earning woman reduced to a hostage trapped by her own success. You would really do that, I whispered, letting my voice tremble. You would take half my retirement. I would take everything I am legally entitled to, he stated coldly. You are married to me. Your income is my income. If you want to keep your house, your retirement, and your precious financial security, you will stop questioning my investments. You will stop acting like a warden. You will pay for Leo's party tomorrow, and you will show up to the country club looking like a supportive, loving aunt. If you embarrass me or Penelope or your parents, I will file the papers the very next day and drain you dry. I looked at the man I had married 6 years ago. The handsome, charming salesman who had swept me off my feet was completely gone. In his place stood a parasite, a financial leech who felt entirely justified in draining my resources to fund his secret child with my sister. He genuinely believed that the legal system was his ultimate weapon. He thought no-fault divorce laws gave him a free pass to commit marital treason while walking away with a massive payday. He had no idea that a no-fault state still heavily penalizes the dissipation of marital assets. He had no idea that spending joint funds on an affair partner and a secret child constitutes extreme financial fraud in the eyes of a family court judge. He thought he was giving me a masterclass in divorce law, entirely forgetting that I investigated asset concealment for federal task forces. I let a single tear slip down my cheek. It was a masterpiece of acting. I looked down at the floor, hugging my arms around my chest. Okay, Bradley, I said, my voice barely audible. I understand. I will not look at the accounts anymore. I will pay the Oakmont bill tomorrow. Please do not file for divorce. I do not want to lose half of everything I have worked for. Bradley smiled. It was a victorious, predatory smile. He reached out and patted my shoulder, a condescending gesture of ownership. That is a good girl, he said softly. I knew you would see reason. I am going to take a shower. Make sure my blue suit is pressed for tomorrow. I have a big client meeting. I watched him walk out of the kitchen and head up the stairs. The moment he was out of sight, I wiped the fake tear from my cheek. My heart was pounding with a steady, lethal rhythm. He wanted a war over assets. He wanted to use the legal system to strip me bare. He had just handed me the exact motivation I needed to destroy him without a single ounce of mercy. I walked over to the trash can and threw away the coffee mug I had been washing. Then I went to my office and locked the door. I had a massive birthday bill to handle, but first I needed to prepare for the fallout. The counterattack was over. The demolition was about to begin. My phone vibrated on the desk, shattering the silence of my office. The caller ID displayed my mother's name. I let it vibrate 3 times before answering, ensuring my voice sounded appropriately subdued and broken. "Hello, Mom," I said softly. "Claire, listen to me very carefully," Diane commanded. Her voice was sharp, lacking any warmth or basic greeting. "I just got off the phone with the event coordinator at the Oakmont. Penelope had to make a few last-minute adjustments to the catering menu and the entertainment package. Desmond's colleagues are bringing their children, and she cannot serve standard party food to the hospital board. She upgraded to the platinum tier." "Adjustments?" I asked, keeping my tone entirely neutral. "What kind of adjustments?" "Do not play stupid with me," Diane snapped. "The total cost for the event is no longer $15,000. The final bill will be $28,500. And you are going to pay the entire balance." I gripped the edge of my desk. The sheer breathtaking greed was astounding. $28,500. Mom, that is an astronomical amount of money for a 5-year-old's birthday party. I reluctantly agreed to the deposit. I did not agree to finance a nearly $30,000 gala. "You agreed to support your family?" Diane shot back, her voice rising in pitch. "And frankly, you owe Penelope a massive apology for the disgusting accusations you made this morning. Paying for this party is the absolute least you can do to make amends. Bradley told me you snooped through his accounts and threw a hysterical fit. You are losing your grip on reality, Claire." "I am not hallucinating bank statements," I said, letting a calculated hint of desperation bleed into my voice, playing the exact part she expected. "Mom, please. 28,000 is too much. I cannot just throw that kind of money away." "It is not a negotiation," Diane stated coldly. "You have a black card. You have the liquidity. And if you refuse to pay this final bill, I will make good on your father's promise. Actually, I will not even wait for him to do it. I will do it myself." I remained silent, waiting for the guillotine to drop. "I have a charity luncheon next Tuesday with Richard Caldwell, the senior managing partner at your accounting firm." Diane continued, her words dripping with absolute malice. "Richard and his wife are very good friends of ours. If you do not pay that invoice in full at the end of the party, I will sit down with Richard and express my deep maternal concern for your mental health. I will tell him you are suffering from a severe psychotic break. I will explain that you are experiencing intense paranoid delusions about your husband and your sister. I will tell him you are fabricating financial fraud scenarios in your own head." A cold chill washed over me. She knew exactly how to destroy my credibility, and she was wielding that knowledge with surgical precision. "Do you know what happens to a forensic accountant when her own mother reports that she is fabricating financial documents due to mental illness?" Diane asked, her tone viciously triumphant. "They will pull you off every active case. They will audit every file you have ever touched. They will question your CPA license. You will become a massive liability to the firm. Your career will be over before the month ends." She was absolutely right. In the high-stakes world of corporate auditing, integrity and mental stability were everything. If a senior partner received a credible warning from a wealthy, socially connected family member, they would bench me immediately to mitigate their own risk. My mother was weaponizing my professional ethics against me. She was holding a gun to the career I had spent over a decade building, all to secure a luxury party for my husband's illegitimate child. "You would really destroy my life over Penelope's party," I whispered, my voice cracking perfectly. "You would ruin your own daughter." "You ruined yourself the moment you decided to attack your sister's marriage," Diane replied without a single ounce of hesitation or remorse. "Penelope is a dedicated mother. Desmond is a pillar of the medical community. I will not let your bitter, barren jealousy tear them apart. You are going to bring that black card to the Oakmont. You are going to smile. You are going to pay the $28,500. And you are going to thank Desmond and Penelope for allowing you to be part of Leo's life." I squeezed my eyes shut, marveling at the absolute darkness of her soul. She was fully prepared to sacrifice my livelihood, my marriage, and my sanity to maintain her country club facade. She did not care about the truth. She only cared about the performance and her precious social standing. "Okay," I sobbed, forcing a wet, jagged breath into the phone receiver. "Okay, Mom, I will do it. I will bring the card to the party. I will pay the final bill. Just please do not talk to Richard Caldwell. Please do not take my job away. It is all I have. See that you do, Diane said, her voice instantly returning to its brisk managerial tone, as if she had just successfully negotiated a business contract. Wear the navy silk dress. You look too washed out in pastels. And try to put on some decent makeup. I do not want Desmond's friends thinking you are depressed. The line clicked dead. I lowered the phone from my ear, setting it down on the glass desk. The fake tears dried instantly on my face. The performance was over. My mother had just handed me the ultimate confirmation that she was beyond redemption. She had drawn the battle lines clearly and unambiguously. I opened my encrypted folder and added a new note documenting the extortion attempt and the direct threat to my professional license. My family believed they had successfully terrorized me into submission. They believed my silence and my compliance were guaranteed. They thought I was a broken, defeated woman, clinging desperately to her job. They were about to learn that a forensic accountant with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous entity on the planet. Section 10 1000 words. The counterattack was over. The demolition was about to begin. I closed the encrypted dossier on my desktop and shut down the computer. The time for digital investigation was over. Now the physical performance had to begin. I needed them completely off guard. I needed them arrogant, relaxed, and entirely convinced that they held all the power. A cornered animal is unpredictable, but a predator who thinks it has already won its meal is blind to the trap closing around its legs. When Bradley finally emerged from the master bathroom later that evening, he looked refreshed and infuriatingly smug. He had styled his hair and splashed on an excessive amount of expensive cologne, likely preparing for a late dinner or perhaps another clandestine meeting. I was sitting on the edge of the bed waiting for him. I had intentionally removed my makeup and changed into an oversized gray sweater, pulling the sleeves over my hands to look as small and vulnerable as possible. He stopped in the doorway, rubbing a towel through his damp hair. He looked down at me with an expression of cold expectation. "Well," he demanded, "did you fix your attitude problem, or are we calling divorce attorneys in the morning?" I kept my eyes fixed on the hardwood floor, forcing my shoulders to slump. "Mom called me," I said, my voice trembling with perfectly calibrated fear. "She told me about the catering upgrades. She told me the final bill is going to be $28,500. Bradley's eyes lit up with greedy satisfaction, and he prompted, crossing his arms over his chest. "And I agreed to pay it," I whispered, letting out a shaky breath. "I told her I will bring my black card to the Oakmont on Saturday. I will cover the entire balance at the end of the party. Please, Bradley, please do not file for divorce. And please tell Mom not to call the senior partners at my firm. I cannot lose my job. It is everything I have worked for." The transformation in Bradley was instantaneous and nauseating. The aggressive, hostile tyrant vanished, replaced by a magnanimous, patronizing patriarch. He walked over to the bed and sat down beside me, placing a heavy hand on my knee. "See, Claire," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Was that so hard? This is what marriage is about. We support each other through temporary hurdles. You make a substantial income, and it is only right that you share that success with the family. I am glad you finally decided to act like a supportive wife instead of a selfish accountant." I nodded, keeping my gaze lowered so he could not see the absolute hatred burning in my eyes. "I am sorry I snooped through the bank accounts, Bradley. I was just stressed about the missing $40,000. He patted my knee, a gesture of ownership. "Do not ever cross that boundary again, Claire. My crypto investments are my business. You handle the spreadsheets at work and leave the wealth building to me. As long as you play your part and keep the family happy, we will not have any more problems. I will call your mother and tell her you are cooperating." He stood up, grabbed his keys from the dresser, and walked out of the room, whistling a cheerful tune. He was going out to celebrate his successful extortion, likely with Penelope. I sat perfectly still until I heard his car pull out of the driveway. Then I allowed myself a single cold smile. He had swallowed the bait whole. The next morning, the deception continued. My phone lit up with a text message from Penelope. It was a masterclass in passive-aggressive victory. Mom told me you are covering the overages for Leo's big day, she wrote. Desmond was getting so stressed about the platinum catering package, but I told him my big sister always comes through for us when we really need her. Thank you for finally stepping up, Claire. It means the world to Leo. The sheer audacity of her message was breathtaking. She was thanking me for funding a party for the child she conceived with my husband, all while hiding behind her oblivious pediatrician husband. I typed out my response, ensuring it sounded sufficiently chastised and compliant. Of course, Penelope, I replied. Leo deserves a beautiful 5th birthday. I will be there with my card. Her response was immediate. Perfect. Be there at 2 o'clock sharp. And please wear something flattering but not too flashy. We want the focus to be on the birthday boy, not on your work outfits. I locked my phone screen and placed it on the kitchen counter. Every time they pushed, every time they issued a command or a subtle insult, I felt the metaphorical noose tightening around their necks. They were lulling themselves into a state of absolute complacency. They believed they held all the leverage because of Diane's threat to my career and Bradley's threat of financial ruin. They were totally blind to the fact that I was already orchestrating their total destruction. Later that afternoon, Desmond sent a message to the main family group chat. Hey everyone, he wrote. I just wanted to express how incredibly blessed I feel. Penelope has worked so hard to put this party together for our little man, and Claire, your generosity in helping us secure the Oakmont is beyond words. I am so lucky to be part of this family. Cannot wait to celebrate Leo with all of you on Saturday. I read Desmond's message, and a sharp pang of genuine sorrow pierced my chest. Desmond was a good man. He was a dedicated doctor, a loving father figure, and a faithful husband. He was the only innocent adult in this entire twisted dynamic. He was the collateral damage in Penelope and Bradley's sick game. But Desmond deserved the truth. He deserved to know that his marriage was a parasitic lie, and that the miracle child he loved so fiercely belonged to the man he called his brother-in-law. I would not let him live in the dark for 1 second longer than necessary. The rest of the week was a grueling exercise in psychological endurance. I treated my family like a hostile corporate entity during an undercover audit. I cooked Bradley's favorite dinners. I ironed his suits. I acted like the terrified, obedient wife, clinging desperately to her marriage and her professional reputation. Bradley grew increasingly comfortable bragging loudly on the phone to his friends about his investments and his upcoming golf trips. He treated me like an employee who had been successfully disciplined. My parents stopped calling to harass me. Diane sent one brief text confirming the dress code for the country club, indicating her satisfaction that I had fallen back into my role as the family cash machine. They were entirely relaxed, expecting a smooth, luxurious weekend funded by my hard-earned money. They had no idea that beneath the surface of my quiet compliance, I was moving assets, gathering legal firepower, and preparing to strike. The psychological trap was set flawlessly. The pivot was complete. They were walking straight into the slaughterhouse, and they were smiling the entire way. While Bradley gloated over his perceived victory, and my mother planned her grand country club entrance, I was executing a financial and legal lockdown with absolute military precision. They thought they had backed me into a corner of submission, but my silence was merely the quiet before a devastating storm. Behind the scenes, I was moving assets, gathering biological evidence, and preparing a legal trap so tightly woven that none of them would ever escape. On Tuesday morning, after Bradley left for work, whistling a cheerful tune, I drove straight to the downtown offices of a premier family law firm. I sat across the polished mahogany table from Ms. Reed, a high-powered divorce attorney known for utterly dismantling fraudulent spouses. I handed her my encrypted drive containing every piece of evidence I had gathered. She reviewed the hotel receipts, the credit card payoffs, and the transfers from our joint savings account with a sharp, predatory smile. Bradley threatened to demand half my assets and claim alimony. I told her, keeping my voice clinical and detached. He believes the no-fault divorce laws in the state will protect him and reward his infidelity. Ms. Reed laughed, a dry, sharp sound. He is severely mistaken. While this is a no-fault state, the deliberate dissipation of marital assets to fund an affair, Partner constitutes egregious financial fraud. He did not just cheat. He embezzled from your joint accounts to sustain a secret life. We are going to file for a divorce, citing extreme financial misconduct. She slid a thick stack of legal documents across the table. I signed the divorce petition right then and there. We strategically scheduled the filing so that Bradley would not be formally served by a process server until Monday morning, right after the birthday party. At the exact moment the court processed the filing, an automatic financial injunction would drop, freezing Bradley out of any ability to open new lines of credit or transfer funds. Next, we moved to fortify my personal wealth. Using my expertise as a forensic accountant, I worked with Ms. Reed to establish an irrevocable domestic asset protection trust. Because I was moving my own distinctly earned income, and because we possessed hard evidence of Bradley actively draining our shared accounts, the trust was perfectly legal and impenetrable. My entire salary, all my corporate bonuses, and my personal investment portfolios were immediately routed into a secure corporate account. If Bradley tried to touch a single dime, he would be hitting a reinforced concrete wall. The legal and financial preparations were locked in, but that was only half the battle. I needed biological proof to detonate the final bomb. A timeline of hotel receipts and medical billing codes was highly circumstantial evidence. A jury might convict on it, but a family in deep denial could still attempt to rationalize it away. I needed cold, hard, undeniable DNA. Getting Bradley's DNA was incredibly simple. I walked into our master bathroom, took his secondary toothbrush, snipped a generous cluster of bristles using sterile scissors, and sealed them inside a plastic evidence bag. Acquiring Leo's DNA required proximity and a flawless performance. On Wednesday afternoon, I drove to Penelope's sprawling suburban home under the guise of dropping off an early birthday gift. I had purchased a wildly expensive designer outfit for Leo, playing the role of the compliant, generous aunt perfectly. Penelope opened the front door, wearing premium yoga pants and a smug, self-satisfied smile. "Oh, Claire," she cooed, snatching the designer shopping bag from my hands. "You actually brought a gift early. I am glad you are finally getting into the spirit of things. Desmond is in the kitchen making snacks for Leo. Come in and say hello." I walked into the bright, airy kitchen. Desmond was standing at the counter slicing fresh fruit. He looked up and gave me a warm, genuine smile. "Claire, it is so great to see you. We really appreciate you helping out with the party this weekend. It means the world to us." Guilt pierced my chest like a physical blade. Desmond was such a profoundly good man, an African-American pediatrician who dedicated his life to healing children and providing a beautiful life for his family. He looked at Penelope with such pure, unfiltered adoration, completely blind to the fact that his wife was a monster. Leo came running into the kitchen, a bundle of chaotic 5-year-old energy. He had Penelope's blonde hair, but his eyes the exact shade of piercing blue, as Bradley stared back at me. He grabbed a juice box from the counter, pierced it with the small plastic straw, and began drinking greedily while watching cartoons on a tablet. I stood near the kitchen island, making polite, agonizing small talk with Desmond about his hospital schedule. My eyes remained locked on the juice box. I needed that straw. It was the perfect vessel for a saliva sample. Penelope turned her back to answer a phone call, stepping out onto the patio. Desmond turned his attention to the stove to check on a simmering pot of soup. Leo finished his juice, crushed the cardboard box with his small hands, and left it sitting right on the edge of the coffee table before running off to play with his toys. My heart hammered against my ribs with a deafening rhythm. I moved casually, walking past the coffee table. With one swift, practiced motion, I swiped the discarded juice box and dropped it directly into my large designer tote bag. I immediately transferred it into a sterile Ziploc bag I had waiting inside. I excused myself a few minutes later, claiming I had to return to a massive audit at the firm. Desmond hugged me goodbye, thanking me once again for my generosity. Penelope simply waved from the patio, completely oblivious to the fact that I had just walked out of her house with the instrument of her destruction. I drove straight to a private independent genetics laboratory that specialized in forensic paternity testing. I placed the plastic bags containing the toothbrush bristles and the juice box straw on the intake counter. I paid a massive premium rush fee in cash. I looked the lab technician directly in the eye and told him I needed the results processed and verified by Friday afternoon without a single exception. The next 48 hours were an exercise in supreme psychological endurance. I went to work. I smiled at Bradley when he came home. I reviewed the final catering menu Diane sent me for the party. I operated like a machine fueled entirely by the anticipation of the impending execution. At exactly 4:00 on Friday afternoon, an encrypted email arrived in my secure inbox from the genetics laboratory. I locked my office door, took a deep breath, and clicked open the attached PDF report. I scrolled past the dense scientific methodology and the genetic marker breakdowns, scanning directly to the final conclusive paragraph at the bottom of the page. The bold black text stood out against the white background, delivering the absolute, unvarnished truth. Probability of paternity is 99.9%. Bradley was the biological father of Leo. I exhaled a long, slow breath. A terrifying calm washed over my entire body. I printed the laboratory report on thick, high-quality paper. I folded it precisely and slipped it into a crisp white envelope. I sealed the envelope and placed it inside my purse right next to my black credit card. The checkmate was fully prepped. I was ready for the party. Saturday afternoon arrived with blinding sunshine and clear blue skies, as if nature itself was mocking the dark storm I was about to unleash. I pulled my car up to the sweeping circular driveway of the Oakmont Country Club. The architecture was imposing, featuring massive white columns and perfectly manicured hedges that screamed generational wealth and exclusivity. A valet in a crisp uniform immediately opened my door. I stepped out, smoothing the skirt of the navy silk dress my mother had explicitly ordered me to wear. It fit perfectly, like a tailored suit of armor. I gripped my designer clutch tighter, feeling the rigid edge of the crisp white envelope pressing against the leather. Walking through the massive oak double doors of the country club, I was immediately hit by a wall of extravagant floral scents. Penelope had clearly ignored every conceivable budget constraint. Custom arrangements of white roses and imported blue hydrangeas cascaded from every surface. A string quartet played a sophisticated classical rendition of popular children's songs in the corner of the grand foyer. Waitstaff in white gloves circulated with trays of premium champagne and delicate caviar hors d'oeuvres. This was not a fifth birthday party for a kindergarten boy. This was a high society gala designed entirely to feed my sister's insatiable narcissism. I paused at the entrance to the main ballroom, observing the sickening display of the perfect family facade playing out before my eyes. The room was packed with at least 100 guests. I recognized several senior pediatric surgeons from Desmond's hospital, along with members of the hospital's executive board. My parents, Gregory and Diane, were holding court near a towering custom cake that looked like a professional architectural model. Diane was wearing a heavy diamond necklace that caught the light with every fake laugh she produced. She was gesturing elegantly toward Penelope, making sure everyone in her orbit knew that her golden daughter was the perfect society hostess. Penelope stood at the center of the room, soaking up the attention like a dry sponge. She wore a stunning white tailored jumpsuit that probably cost more than my first car. She held a glass of champagne in one hand and rested the other on Desmond's arm, portraying the image of the adoring, devoted wife. Desmond looked incredibly handsome in a light gray suit, beaming with genuine, unfiltered happiness. He was introducing Penelope to a group of older doctors, looking at her as if she hung the moon and stars in the sky. Desmond excused himself from the group of doctors and walked over to Leo. He knelt down on the polished floor, not caring about creasing his expensive trousers. He pulled a small linen napkin from his pocket and gently wiped a smudge of frosting from Leo's chin. The boy giggled and wrapped his arms tightly around Desmond's neck, shouting that he was having the best birthday ever. Desmond closed his eyes and hugged the boy back, pressing a kiss to his forehead. It was a moment of profound, pure parental love. Desmond was a man who had been told he could never be a father who believed he had been given a miracle. Watching him pour his entire soul into a child that belonged to the man who was currently drinking scotch across the room was physically revolting. I had to force myself to look away, gripping my clutch until my knuckles turned white. And then there was Bradley. My husband was standing near the private bar, laughing loudly with a group of men holding a glass of top-shelf liquor. He looked entirely in his element, playing the role of the successful, wealthy corporate executive. He caught my eye across the room and gave me a slow, arrogant smirk. He raised his glass to me in a silent, mocking toast. He truly believed he had won. He believed I had shown up obediently to play the role of the silent checkbook, ready to fund his secret family's extravaganza, because I was too terrified of losing my career to fight back. Gregory, my father, was busy working the room with the calculated efficiency of a seasoned politician. He was introducing Bradley to a group of real estate developers, clapping my husband on the back and loudly praising his business acumen. They were putting on a united front, a solid wall of patriarchal dominance. Gregory was ensuring everyone in that room saw Bradley as an integral, respected part of the family hierarchy. He was actively rewarding the man who had violated his daughter and stolen her savings simply because maintaining the illusion of the perfect son-in-law protected Penelope's fraudulent marriage. I maintained a perfectly neutral expression and walked into the crowd. The sheer hypocrisy of the room was suffocating. Every smile was a lie. Every affectionate touch between Bradley and Penelope when Desmond looked away was a dagger. But I did not feel the crushing, agonizing betrayal I had felt just 3 days ago. The grief had been entirely burned away, leaving behind nothing but cold tactical execution. Diane spotted me first. She excused herself from a conversation with a hospital board member and marched toward me, her eyes doing a quick, highly critical sweep of my appearance. She grabbed my arm, squeezing it hard enough to bruise, and pulled me slightly away from the main thoroughfare. "You are late," Diane hissed, keeping her voice low and her smile frozen in place. "And you look entirely too rigid. Relax your shoulders, Claire. People are watching. Richard Caldwell from your firm is sitting at table 4. Go say hello to him and remember what we discussed. One wrong word, one hint of your little paranoid breakdown, and I will sit down with him before they serve the main course. Do you understand me?" I looked down at the hand digging into my arm. Then I looked into my mother's eyes. "I understand perfectly, Mom," I said, my voice smooth and compliant. I brought the card. "Everything is going to be handled exactly the way it needs to be handled today. You do not have to worry about a single thing." Diane released my arm, looking marginally satisfied. "See that you do. Go get a drink and try to look happy for your nephew." She turned and swept back into the crowd, rejoining my father. I continued to circulate, moving through the crowd like a phantom. I watched Penelope lean over to whisper something in Bradley's ear. Bradley threw his head back and laughed, a private, intimate exchange hidden in plain sight. They were completely brazen, intoxicated by their own perceived cleverness. They thought they had successfully manipulated the system, outsmarted science, and bullied me into permanent submission. They had no idea the foundation was wired with explosives, and I was holding the only detonator. I took a sip of my sparkling water, feeling the envelope in my clutch against my palm. The party was just getting started. I moved away from the bustling epicenter of the ballroom, seeking a momentary reprieve near a towering swan carved entirely out of ice. The air was thick with the scent of expensive catering and the overlapping chatter of Seattle's medical and real estate elite. I took another slow sip of my sparkling water, keeping my posture deliberately relaxed. My eyes scanned the room, tracking my targets with the precision of an auditor finding discrepancies in a ledger. Bradley was now engaged in an animated conversation with a hospital administrator, laughing loudly with a scotch in his hand. Penelope was posing for a hired photographer, aggressively adjusting Leo's little silk bow tie. Then I saw Desmond breaking away from a group of colleagues. His eyes caught mine, and his face immediately lit up with that signature warm, genuine smile. He began making his way across the polished dance floor, navigating through the crowd with easy grace. He looked incredibly sharp in his fitted dark gray suit, but it was his fundamental decency that always made him stand out in a room full of sharks. "Claire," he said, reaching me and pulling me into a firm, affectionate hug. "I am so glad I found you. I have been trying to catch you alone since you walked in." I hugged him back, feeling a sudden crushing weight in my chest. "Desmond," I said, forcing a bright, flawless smile to my face. The party is absolutely beautiful. You and Penelope really went all out for his 5th birthday. He stepped back, shaking his head with a self-deprecating chuckle. I cannot take the credit for the aesthetics. You know Penelope. She has the eye for this kind of thing. But Claire, I actually wanted to pull you aside to talk to you about the party. He glanced around, ensuring we had a pocket of privacy, then lowered his voice. I need to thank you. Properly thank you. I kept my expression perfectly composed. Thank me for what, Desmond? He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, his dark eyes completely sincere. Penelope told me what you did. She told me about the deposit and how you stepped in to help us cover the platinum upgrades for today. She said you insisted on doing it as a special gift for Leo. The lie was so smooth, so effortlessly cruel, that it took my breath away. Penelope had not just demanded I pay the extortionate bill to save her social status. She had actually spun it to her husband as a generous, unprompted gift from her loving, wealthy sister. She had weaponized my stolen money to make herself look like a master party planner while keeping Desmond completely in the dark about their financial ruin. She was playing both sides of the board. It is no problem, Desmond, I managed to say, my vocal cords feeling tight. I just want Leo to have a wonderful day. You do not understand how much this means to me, Claire. He continued, his voice thick with emotion. I know Penelope and I have a great life, but things have been a bit tight lately. My medical school loans are steep, and the mortgage on the new house is substantial. I told her we had to scale back for this birthday. I told her we could not afford the Oakmont. When she came to me and said you had offered to sponsor the event because you wanted Leo to have the best, I was overwhelmed. You are an incredible sister to her, Claire, and an amazing aunt to Leo. Every single word he spoke was a serrated blade twisting directly into my heart. He was thanking me for financing a lie. He was looking at me with pure, unadulterated gratitude, while the woman he loved and the man I married were bleeding us both dry. Desmond sighed, looking out across the ballroom, toward where Leo was currently chasing a silver balloon. You know how hard it was for us in the beginning. You know what we went through to get him. I swallowed hard, maintaining direct eye contact. Yes, I know. I was in such a dark place back then. Desmond said, his voice dropping to a vulnerable whisper. When the clinic told me about my condition, when they said I could not give Penelope a child, I felt like less than a man. I felt like I had failed her. I offered her a divorce. I told her she deserved a husband who could give her a family. But she stayed. She stayed with me, Claire, and then God gave us our miracle. He turned his gaze back to me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Leo saved my life. He gave me a purpose beyond the hospital walls. Every time I look at him, I see the best parts of Penelope. I am just so incredibly grateful for my family. For Penelope, for Leo, for you, and even for Bradley. My breath hitched. Bradley. I asked, forcing the word out. Yeah, Desmond chuckled softly. Bradley has been amazing. He is such a good uncle. He always makes time for Leo. You know, he actually stopped by the house on Thursday to drop off a pre-birthday gift for him. It takes a village, right? I am just lucky my son has such a strong male role model around when I'm stuck on a 36-hour shift at the pediatric ward. The sheer psychological torture of this conversation was almost unbearable. Thursday. Bradley had stopped by on Thursday, the same day as his regular boutique hotel booking. He was playing the devoted uncle right in Desmond's living room while secretly fathering the child Desmond was raising. The depravity was absolute. Desmond was standing here pouring his heart out, expressing gratitude for the very people who were dismantling his life piece by piece. I looked at Desmond, this brilliant, compassionate man who spent his life saving sick children, and I felt an overwhelming protective fury. My family was using his love as a weapon against him. They were relying on his fundamental goodness to shield their corruption. He was holding up a pedestal for a wife who despised him and a brother-in-law who had cuckolded him. You are a good father, Desmond, I said, my voice trembling with genuine emotion. The best father. Leo is incredibly lucky to have you raising him. Never forget that. No matter what happens, you are the one who loves him. Desmond smiled warmly, patting my shoulder again. Thank you, Claire. That means a lot. Anyway, I should get back to the guests. Richard Caldwell from your firm was just asking about you. You should go say hello. And seriously, thank you again for today. You are going to make me cry if I keep talking about it. He gave me one last squeeze and walked away, disappearing back into the sea of designer suits and silk dresses. I stood frozen by the ice sculpture, my chest heaving as if I had just run a marathon. I had thought the hardest part of today would be facing my parents or pretending to tolerate Bradley. I was wrong. The hardest part was looking a good man in the eye and accepting his gratitude, knowing that in just a few short hours, I was going to detonate a bomb that would obliterate his entire universe. I reached into my clutch, my fingers brushing against the crisp white envelope holding the DNA results. I closed my eyes, taking a deep, steadying breath. I could not save Desmond from the heartbreak, but I could save him from living a lie. The surgery on this family was going to be brutal, messy, and excruciatingly painful. But it was the only way to cut out the cancer. I opened my eyes, my resolve hardened into impenetrable steel. I smoothed the fabric of my navy dress and walked purposefully into the crowd toward my firm's managing partner. Richard Caldwell was standing near the towering floor-to-ceiling windows, nursing a scotch and nodding along to a story being told by a local real estate developer. He was a man who valued precision, discretion, and absolute loyalty. When he spotted me, his austere expression softened into a genuine smile of professional respect. "Claire," he said, extending a hand as I approached, "I was hoping you would make it today. Your mother mentioned you were helping fund this incredible celebration. It is a spectacular event." I shook his hand with a firm, confident grip. "Thank you, Richard. Family milestones are always an investment. I wanted to make sure Leo had a memorable day. By the way, I finalized the offshore audit for the Peterson account yesterday afternoon. The preliminary findings have been securely routed to your encrypted inbox." His eyes lit up with approval. "Excellent work as always, Claire. You are the sharpest forensic mind we have on the floor. I do not know how you balance it all, but your dedication does not go unnoticed. We will discuss the partner track evaluations next month." I smiled warmly, feeling a vital piece of my armor click into place. Diane had threatened to tell Richard I was having a psychotic breakdown, but standing here delivering impeccable audit results and discussing my partnership trajectory, I was dismantling her leverage brick by brick. If my mother tried to spin a tale of hysterical delusion now, Richard would dismiss it entirely. He was looking at his top earner, not a fragile victim. My quiet victory was violently interrupted by the sharp clinking of a glass. I turned to see Penelope marching across the polished hardwood floor, flanked by 3 of her country club friends. She was holding a brimful crystal goblet of deep red Pinot Noir. Her face was flushed with champagne, and the arrogant thrill of being the center of attention. Bradley trailed just a few steps behind her, a smug spectator ready to watch the main event. "Oh, look, everyone," Penelope announced, her voice projecting loudly enough to hush the surrounding conversations. "The generous aunt is talking business at a 5-year-old's birthday party. Can you not turn off the spreadsheets for one single afternoon, Claire?" I maintained my composed smile, ignoring the sudden awkward silence that fell over Richard and the other guests. "I am simply catching up with a colleague, Penelope. It is a beautiful party. You must be very proud." Penelope stopped right in front of me, her eyes flashing with a toxic mix of jealousy and triumph. She looked me up and down, taking in the pristine, tailored lines of my navy silk dress. She hated that I looked professional. She hated that Richard Caldwell was treating me with respect. She needed to assert her dominance, and she needed to do it in front of the largest audience possible. "It is a gorgeous dress," she said, leaning in incredibly close. "So sleek, so structured, so stiff." She shifted her weight forward. It was not a stumble. It was not an accident. It was a deliberate, calculated flick of her wrist. The entire goblet of dark red wine slashed across the front of my silk dress. The liquid soaked instantly into the expensive fabric, spreading like a massive bruised stain across my chest and down my skirt. Gasps rippled through the immediate crowd. Richard Caldwell took a startled step back. I stood perfectly still, looking down at the ruined silk and the red droplets splattering onto my leather heels. "Oh my God!" Penelope shrieked, covering her mouth with her free hand, performing an exaggerated pantomime of horror. "I am so clumsy. I am so sorry, Claire." But her eyes were dancing with vicious delight. She did not reach for a napkin. She did not offer to help. Instead, she turned to her friends and let out a high-pitched theatrical laugh. "Well, I suppose it is actually a good thing," Penelope declared, ensuring her voice carried across the silent room. "If you had kids of your own, you would be used to getting your clothes ruined. But since you are completely incapable of giving Bradley a family, I guess this is the closest you will get to a messy parenting moment." The cruelty of the insult hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. She was publicly weaponizing the fertility struggles I had endured early in my marriage. She was branding me as barren and defective right in front of my boss, my husband, and my parents. I looked past Penelope and saw Diane and Gregory watching from a few yards away. My mother had a faint, satisfied smile on her lips. She was allowing her golden child to publicly humiliate me as punishment for my rebellion that morning. Bradley stood behind Penelope, swirling his drink, watching me closely to see if I would finally break. They all wanted me to run out of the room in tears. They wanted me to flee in shame, solidifying my role as the weak, unstable outcast. I did not move a single muscle. I did not raise my voice. I did not shed a tear. I calmly reached onto a passing waiter's tray and picked up a crisp white linen napkin. I dabbed gently at the hem of my dress, ensuring my movements were entirely unhurried and precise. "You are absolutely right, Penelope," I said, my voice carrying a chilling, resonant calm that cut through the tension like a scalpel. "I do not have children of my own. I have never had to deal with the messy consequences of bringing a child into this world. I have never had to clean up the dirt or hide the stains." I lowered the napkin and looked directly into her eyes, holding her gaze until her triumphant smile began to falter. "But you do," I continued, my tone dropping to a deadly whisper meant just for her and Bradley. "You have to live with the stains, Penelope. And the thing about dark stains is that no matter how much money you spend trying to cover them up, they always bleed through eventually. Some messes simply cannot be washed away." Penelope's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of genuine apprehension breaking through her champagne-fueled arrogance. Bradley shifted uncomfortably behind her, his posture suddenly rigid. The dual meaning of my words hit them precisely as intended, but to the rest of the room it merely sounded like a graceful, dignified response to a horrific insult. Richard Caldwell stepped forward, handing me his own dry handkerchief. "You handled that with remarkable grace, Claire," he said loudly enough for Penelope to hear. "A true professional under pressure." "Thank you, Richard," I replied, offering him a small, polite smile. "If you will excuse me, I believe the party is winding down, and there are some final accounts that need to be settled with the event manager." I turned my back on Penelope, walking away with my head held high, ignoring the massive red stain on my dress. The physical humiliation meant absolutely nothing to me now. It was merely the final nail in her own coffin. As I walked toward the grand foyer, where the country club staff were beginning to tally the final expenses, I knew the countdown had reached 0. The facade had been played to its absolute limit. It was time to pay the bill. The grand ballroom slowly emptied out, leaving behind the quiet, hollow echo of a finished celebration. The hired string quartet packed their instruments into velvet-lined cases. The catering staff in their crisp white uniforms began clearing away the remnants of the platinum package. Half-eaten caviar tartlets and abandoned glasses of vintage champagne littered the tables like the aftermath of a minor royal decree. I stood near the massive mahogany entrance doors, waiting with the absolute stillness of a predator. The dark red wine stain on my silk dress had dried into a stiff crust, but I wore it like a badge of honor. Desmond was standing by the coat check, shaking hands with the last of his departing colleagues. He held a sleepy Leo against his shoulder. The little boy was clutching a silver helium balloon, his eyes drooping, shutting completely. Desmond thanked the senior pediatric surgeons for attending his voice warm and filled with genuine appreciation. He was a good man, completely blind to the den of vipers he called his family. Once the final high-profile guest had been valeted away, the atmosphere in the room shifted entirely. The performative, polite smiles vanished. The polished country club etiquette was instantly discarded. My mother Diane let out a loud dramatic sigh and kicked off her designer heels, rubbing her arches. My father Gregory walked over to the private bar and demanded the bartender pour him a double scotch straight up before the staff closed out the registers. Penelope slumped into a plush velvet armchair near the center of the room. She looked exhausted but positively glowing with arrogant pride. She swirled the last sip of champagne in her glass, examining her flawless manicure. "Did you see the look on the hospital board director's wife?" Penelope gloated, her voice echoing in the nearly empty ballroom. She was absolutely green with envy when she saw the custom imported floral arches. "I guarantee you her son's birthday next month will look like a cheap backyard barbecue compared to this. We completely set the standard today." Bradley strolled over and leaned against the back of Penelope's chair. He unbuttoned his suit jacket and smirked. "It was a flawless execution, Penelope. You threw the party of the decade. They will be talking about this at the hospital for months." Desmond walked over, gently adjusting the sleeping child in his arms. He kissed the top of Penelope's head. "You did an amazing job, honey. It was beautiful. But I have to admit, I am a little terrified to see the final tally. I saw the ice sculpture and the premium seafood station. I thought we agreed to keep the catering within the standard tier." Penelope did not even flinch. She simply waved her hand dismissively, her diamond rings catching the light. "Do not worry about the budget, Desmond. I told you everything is completely under control. We are celebrating Leo. He deserves the absolute best." My father took a sip of his scotch and pointed his glass at Desmond. "She is right, son. You cannot put a price tag on family memories. Besides, you have a very generous support system." As if summoned by the mention of a price tag, the Oakmont event manager walked into the lounge area. His name tag read Mr. Harrison. He was a tall, impeccably groomed man who moved with the quiet discretion expected at an elite country club. He carried a sleek black leather folio pressed neatly against his side. "Excuse me, Dr. Rollins," Mr. Harrison said, approaching Desmond with a polite bow of his head. "I hope the celebration met all of your expectations today. The staff has finished tallying the final consumption metrics and the overtime fees for the entertainment. I have the final invoice ready for your review and settlement." Desmond shifted Leo to his other shoulder and reached for the leather folio. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. It was a wonderful event. Let me just take a look here." Desmond opened the folder. I watched his face closely. The warm, tired smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated shock. The blood drained from his face as his eyes scanned the itemized list. $28,500? Desmond choked out, his voice barely a whisper. He looked up at Penelope, absolute panic in his eyes. "Penelope, what is this? The original quote was for $12,000. How did we incur $16,000 in overages? We do not have the liquidity for this right now. I cannot authorize a nearly $30,000 charge on our accounts." Penelope stood up, smoothing her white jumpsuit, completely unbothered by her husband's genuine distress. She placed a calming hand on his chest, playing the role of the reassuring wife flawlessly. "Desmond, breathe. I told you not to worry about the budget. You work so hard for us, and I wanted today to be stress-free for you." She turned her head and looked directly at me, her eyes gleaming with toxic triumph. "Claire is taking care of the overages as a special gift for Leo. She insisted on it." "Right, Claire." The entire room turned to look at me. Diane sat up straighter in her chair, shooting me a venomous warning glare. Gregory took another sip of his scotch, watching me with the cold expectation of a warden waiting for a prisoner to comply. Desmond looked at me with a mixture of overwhelming relief and deep misplaced gratitude. Bradley stepped forward, detaching himself from Penelope's chair. He walked across the polished floor, closing the distance between us. He stopped just 2 feet away, invading my personal space, projecting his false authority. He held out his hand, palm up, waiting for his prize. "All right, Claire," Bradley said, his voice dripping with condescending smugness. "Time to settle up. You have played your part perfectly today. Now hand over the black card so Mr. Harrison can run the authorization. Do not keep the man waiting." I looked at Bradley's outstretched hand. I looked at Penelope's victorious smirk. I looked at my parents who were already turning back to their drinks, entirely confident that they had successfully terrorized me into funding their web of lies. They thought they had backed me into a corner where my only option was absolute surrender. They thought I was a broken compliant cash machine. I reached into my designer clutch. My fingers bypassed the heavy metal of my black credit card. Instead, they found the crisp, rigid edges of the white envelope, the forensic DNA report, the weapon of mass destruction I had meticulously crafted. I grasped the envelope, my pulse perfectly steady, my breathing completely calm. The charade was officially over. I withdrew my hand from the clutch, leaving the crisp white envelope inside for just a moment longer. I snapped the golden clasp of the bag shut. The sharp metallic click echoed in the tense silence of the ballroom. I did not reach for my wallet. I did not retrieve the black card they were all waiting for with bated breath. Bradley's outstretched hand remained suspended in the air. His smug smile faltered slightly, replaced by a twitch of irritation. "Come on, Claire," he snapped, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper, meant only for me. "Stop playing games. Mr. Harrison is waiting. Hand over the card and let us get out of here." I looked at his open palm. Then I looked past him to where Penelope was sitting in her velvet armchair, watching me with the arrogant expectation of a queen waiting for her subjects to pay tribute. I looked at my mother Diane, who was glaring at me, her eyes flashing a silent, desperate warning about my career. They were all so entirely confident in their psychological hold over me. I stepped around Bradley, completely ignoring his outstretched hand. I walked directly toward Desmond, who was still holding the black leather folio containing the $28,500 invoice. Desmond looked exhausted, completely overwhelmed by the staggering sum his wife had secretly accrued. "Desmond," I said gently, reaching out. I placed my hands over his and carefully slid the leather folder from his grip. "You look incredibly stressed. Please do not worry about this piece of paper." Desmond exhaled a shaky breath, rubbing the back of his neck with his free hand while balancing the sleeping Leo against his chest. "Claire, I cannot let you do this. It is too much money. Penelope had no right to assume you would cover such a massive expense. I will call the bank on Monday. I will take out a personal loan. I cannot accept this kind of charity." "You are not accepting charity, Desmond," I replied, my voice crystal clear and perfectly steady. "Because I am not paying a single cent of this bill." The air in the room seemed to vanish. Bradley spun around, his face draining of color. "What did you just say?" I turned to face my husband, holding the black leather folder in my hands. "I said I am not paying for this, Bradley. I am not paying $28,000. I am not paying $15,000. I am not even paying for a single glass of tap water in this building." Diane sprang from her chair, her designer heels clicking frantically against the hardwood floor. She marched across the room, grabbing my arm with a vicious, bruising grip. "Claire, you are having an episode," she hissed, her voice vibrating with panic and fury. "Remember what we talked about yesterday? Remember your professional stability. Remember what will happen if you do not handle this right now." She was trying to deploy her ultimate weapon. She was trying to remind me that she held my career hostage. I looked down at her hand digging into my arm. I did not flinch. I did not cower. I calmly reached over and pried her fingers off my silk dress, peeling them back one by one. "My professional stability is perfectly intact." "Mom," I said, ensuring my voice carried across the empty ballroom so that everyone, including the Oakmont manager, could hear me clearly. In fact, I just had a wonderful 30-minute conversation with Richard Caldwell. He is incredibly impressed with my recent offshore audit. We are officially discussing my promotion to partner next month. So if you would like to march over to him right now and claim that I am suffering a severe psychotic break, please be my guest. He will simply assume you are senile." Diane physically recoiled, stepping back as if she had touched a live electrical wire. The color drained completely from her face. Her ultimate leverage, the threat that was supposed to keep me permanently enslaved, had just been obliterated in a matter of seconds. Penelope jumped up from her armchair, her face contorted with rage. "You promised!" she shrieked, pointing an accusing finger at me. "You told Mom you would bring the card. You said you would take care of it. You are trying to humiliate me in front of the club manager. I promised I would handle the situation exactly the way it needed to be handled, Penelope, I corrected her smoothly, and that is exactly what I am doing. Bradley stepped between us, his chest puffed out, trying to physically intimidate me into submission. He snatched the leather folder from my hands, his eyes wild with desperate anger. Claire, swipe the card right now. Stop embarrassing yourself, and stop embarrassing this family. You are my wife, and I am telling you to pay the bill. You do not get to tell me to do anything, Bradley, I said, my voice dropping to a lethal icy register. Your financial leverage over me evaporated the moment I locked down my assets and moved my money into a secure trust. You cannot touch my savings. You cannot touch my checking account. And you certainly cannot order me to fund your pathetic extortion scheme. Desmond stepped forward, his brow furrowed in absolute confusion. He adjusted Leo against his shoulder, looking back and forth between us. Extortion. What is going on here? Claire, if you do not want to pay the bill, it is fine. It is our party. It is our responsibility. Bradley, give me the folder. No, I said, holding up a hand to stop Desmond. I looked directly at Bradley, who was standing there clutching the $28,000 invoice, his face shining with cold sweat. I pushed the leather folder hard against his chest, forcing him to hold it against his own heart. Pay your own debts, Bradley, I commanded. Bradley stammered, his confident facade shattering completely. It is not my debt. It is Penelope and Desmond's party. Why are you handing this to me? I turned to Desmond. I looked at the good, honest pediatrician who had spent the last 5 years loving, raising, and providing for a child that was created through an act of unspeakable betrayal. I looked at little Leo sleeping peacefully on his shoulder, completely innocent to the carnage about to unfold. Desmond, I said softly, my voice filled with genuine sorrow for the pain I was about to inflict on him. You are a wonderful man. You are an incredible father figure. But this bill is not yours to pay either. What are you talking about? Claire, Desmond asked, his voice trembling slightly. I turned back to Bradley, my eyes locking onto his terrified, panic-stricken face. The moment had arrived. The execution was at hand. That child was never mine. I said, my words slicing through the silence like a guillotine blade. Why should I pay? The bill for this birthday party belongs to his biological father. And his biological father is standing right in front of you. Desmond stood frozen. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, broken only by the soft, rhythmic breathing of the sleeping child resting against his shoulder. He looked at me, then at Bradley, his dark eyes wide with utter bewilderment. What kind of sick joke is this? Claire, Desmond asked, his voice barely a whisper. I did not blink. I reached into my designer clutch. My fingers grasped the crisp white envelope. It is not a joke, Desmond. It is a forensic certainty. I held the envelope out to him. He stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. Penelope lunged forward, her white jumpsuit flashing under the chandeliers. Do not take that from her, she screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. She is crazy. Mom told you she is having a mental breakdown. She is fabricating things because she is jealous of our family. Desmond ignored his wife. He shifted Leo carefully to his left shoulder, ensuring the boy remained undisturbed, and took the envelope with his right hand. He ripped the seal open with his thumb and pulled out the laboratory report. He read the bold black text. The clinical indisputable results from the genetics facility. Probability of paternity is 99.9%. Desmond's breathing hitched. His hand began to tremble so violently that the paper rattled. What is this? That is a legally binding DNA test. I explained, my voice echoing clearly in the vast empty space. I expedited it through a private forensic laboratory yesterday. The genetic samples were taken directly from Bradley's toothbrush and a juice box Leo drank from at your house on Wednesday afternoon. Desmond shook his head, denial warring violently with the harsh reality written on the page in front of him. No, that is impossible. We struggled for years to conceive. The clinic said I was sterile. The clinic said you were completely and irreversibly sterile. Desmond, I finished for him gently. I know. I accessed the public medical malpractice insurance disclosures you filed a few years ago. You had the microscopic surgery 5 years and 8 months ago. It failed. You had zero viable count. Desmond staggered backward, his shoulder hitting a cocktail table. The glasses on top clinked together. 2 months after you received that devastating medical diagnosis, I continued methodically laying out the timeline. Penelope miraculously became pregnant. She did not use an anonymous donor. She used my husband. Liar. Penelope shrieked, her face contorted in sheer, unadulterated panic. She grabbed Desmond's arm, but he violently flinched away from her touch. She forged that document. Desmond, she is a fraud investigator. She knows exactly how to fake financial and medical records. I do not need to fake anything, I said, turning my gaze to Bradley. My husband was staring at the hardwood floor, absolutely paralyzed by his own cowardice. The arrogant smirk he had worn all afternoon had completely melted away. Tell him, Bradley. Tell Desmond about the Grand Marquis Hotel. Tell him about the luxury suite you booked every single Thursday afternoon for the last 6 years. Desmond slowly turned his head to look at Bradley. Brad, his voice cracked, laced with a desperate plea for this to be a nightmare. Tell me she is lying. Bradley swallowed hard, a thick bead of sweat dripping down his temple. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He took a small, pathetic step backward. His silence was the loudest, most damning confession in the entire room. He cannot deny it, I stated, pulling another folded document from my clutch. Because I have the bank ledgers. I have the wire transfers showing how he embezzled $40,000 from our joint savings account to pay off Penelope's secret credit card debt. He bought her designer handbags. He paid for their weekly hotel rendezvous. And when his stolen money ran out this week, Penelope blackmailed him. I handed the printed text messages to Desmond. Read these, Desmond. Read how your perfect wife speaks about you. She threatened to tell you the truth about why Leo has Bradley's blue eyes if Bradley did not force me to pay for this extravagant party today. Desmond read the texts. I watched his eyes scan the cruel, calculating words his wife had sent to her lover. I watched the profound betrayal sink into his bones. He looked down at the sleeping boy in his arms. The boy he had loved, provided for, and cherished for 5 years. The boy with Bradley's exact shade of piercing blue eyes. The realization hit Desmond with the devastating force of a physical blow. A guttural, agonizing sound escaped his chest. It was the sound of a good man's entire universe shattering into a million irreparable pieces. You knew. Desmond whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears as he turned his devastated gaze toward my parents. Diane and Gregory were cowering near the private bar, refusing to make eye contact with him. You both knew about this. We only suspected, Gregory stammered, holding his hands up defensively. We wanted to protect the family. We wanted to protect you, Desmond. We did not want to ruin your happiness. Protect me! Desmond roared, his voice booming with a terrifying, heartbroken fury that shook the crystal chandeliers above us. You let me raise another man's child. You let me stand here today and thank your daughter for her generosity while her husband slept with my wife. The illusion was dead. The checkmate was absolute. I stood quietly in the wreckage, my hands empty, my soul entirely free. Desmond's roar of betrayal echoed off the vaulted ceilings of the Oakmont ballroom. He clutched little Leo tighter to his chest, shielding the sleeping boy from the toxic radiation of the people he had once called family. He glared at Gregory and Diane, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle twitched near his temple. You sat at my dinner table, Desmond said, his voice dropping to a lethal, trembling frequency. You let me pay for your luxury vacations. You let me fund your exclusive country club memberships. And every single time you looked at my son, you knew he was a bastard born of your daughter's infidelity with your other son-in-law. You are absolute monsters. Diane took a step back, her hands fluttering nervously near her heavy diamond necklace. Desmond, please, you have to understand. Penelope was so incredibly fragile back then. We could not risk her losing the wonderful, stable life you provided for her. We were protecting her from a terrible mistake. You were protecting your own bank accounts. Desmond spat, his disgust palpable and unfiltered. You traded my dignity and Claire's sanity just to maintain your pathetic, artificial social standing. You sold my life to buy yourselves a front row seat to high society. Penelope, realizing that her pristine, curated life was currently disintegrating into a pile of ash, completely lost whatever fragile grip she had on her sanity. She lunged forward, her white silk jumpsuit wrinkling as she grabbed desperately at Desmond's tailored jacket. Desmond. No, Penelope screamed, her voice shrill and jagged, piercing the quiet room. She is lying. Claire is a jealous, vindictive psychopath. She fabricated all of this because she is barren and cannot have children of her own. Bradley means absolutely nothing to me. It was just a stupid physical mistake. You cannot leave me. I am your wife and we have a family. Desmond looked down at her hands gripping his lapels. He did not yell. He did not raise his hand. He simply looked at her with a profound, chilling emptiness that signaled the absolute death of his love. "Take your hands off me," Desmond commanded. The absolute unyielding authority in his voice made Penelope freeze instantly. "You will pack your bags tonight. You will leave my house before I return from the hospital tomorrow. If you ever try to contact me outside of my legal counsel, I will personally ensure every hospital board member, every country club associate, and every single one of your social media followers sees these exact DNA results." Penelope let out a guttural, hysterical shriek. She fell to her knees on the polished hardwood floor, sobbing uncontrollably, her perfectly styled blonde hair falling into her face. She pounded her fists against the ground, throwing a massive theatrical tantrum that perfectly mirrored the maturity of the 5-year-old whose birthday she had thoroughly ruined. Through all of this, the Oakmont event manager, Mr. Harrison, had remained standing near the entrance, holding the black leather folio containing the $28,500 invoice. He cleared his throat, his professional demeanor miraculously intact, despite the escalating soap opera unfolding in his venue. "Excuse me, Mr. Harrison," said his tone polite but completely uncompromising. "I apologize for the interruption, but club policy requires all event balances to be settled before the hosting party departs the premises. I still need a form of payment for the $28,500. Bradley, seeing an opportunity to salvage a microscopic shred of his shattered ego, puffed out his chest and stepped forward. He reached into his tailored suit jacket and pulled out his designer leather wallet. He glared at me, his eyes filled with venomous hatred and desperation. "I will handle it," Bradley sneered, pulling out a heavy platinum credit card. "I do not need Claire's money. I make my own money and I take care of my own responsibilities. Here, run this." Mr. Harrison accepted the card and produced a portable payment terminal from his jacket pocket. He swiped the platinum card. The machine beeped a sharp, unpleasant sound that cut through Penelope's sobbing. "I am sorry, sir." Mr. Harrison said, his face entirely impassive. "This card has been declined." Bradley scoffed, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "That is impossible. Run it again right now. The machine must be broken or losing connection." Mr. Harrison swiped the card a second time. The exact same sharp beep echoed in the silent room. "Declined, sir." "Fine." Bradley snapped, his hands visibly shaking as he pulled out a secondary gold card. "Use this one instead." Mr. Harrison swiped the gold card. A brief pause followed by a sharp beep. "Declined." Bradley's breathing became erratic. He frantically pulled out every single card in his wallet, handing them over in a desperate, sweaty panic. Mr. Harrison swiped them one by one with methodical precision. "Declined. Declined. Declined." "What did you do?" Bradley yelled, whirling around to face me, his eyes wide with genuine, raw terror. "What did you do to my accounts, Claire?" I smiled, a slow, cold, utterly victorious smile. "I told you, Bradley," I said smoothly, my voice projecting absolute control. "I locked down my assets. When I filed for divorce yesterday afternoon, the court immediately issued an automatic financial injunction. All joint accounts are completely frozen by law. And since you completely drained your own private stash of stolen cash to buy Penelope's affection, you currently have absolutely zero liquidity. Your credit lines are shut down pending the federal fraud investigation." "You cannot do this to me!" Bradley panicked, backing away as Mr. Harrison subtly signaled for the country club security guards who were waiting just outside the doors. I am your husband. You cannot just leave me with this debt. Not anymore, I replied. I reached into my designer clutch one final time. I pulled out a thick stack of stapled legal documents. The pristine white paper felt incredibly satisfying against my fingertips. I walked over to where Bradley was standing, paralyzed by his impending financial and legal ruin. I held the documents out. He refused to take them, staring at the paper as if it were coated in lethal poison. I simply opened my fingers and let the heavy stack drop. The documents landed with a satisfying thud right on top of his expensive Italian leather shoes. "You have officially been served," I announced, ensuring my voice carried to the security guards now flanking the room. "I am suing you for extreme financial misconduct, dissipation of marital assets, and fraud. You are going to lose everything you ever valued. You will be paying off the money you stole from me for the rest of your miserable life." I turned my back on him. I did not look at my mother, who was currently weeping hysterically against my father's shoulder. I did not look at Penelope, who was still sobbing on the floor, clutching her ruined reputation. I gave one final, respectful nod to Desmond, who simply nodded back, a silent, profound understanding, passing between two people who had survived the ultimate betrayal. I walked across the grand ballroom, my heels clicking rhythmically against the polished wood. I pushed open the massive oak double doors and stepped out into the blinding afternoon sunshine. The air outside smelled crisp, fresh, and entirely full of absolute freedom. I did not look back. I walked toward my car, handing my valet ticket to the attendant with a polite smile. The air outside smelled crisp, fresh, and entirely full of absolute freedom. I did not look back. But the chaos I left behind in that grand ballroom was only the beginning of the relentless natural consequences that were about to decimate their lives. The fallout was swift and completely merciless. I later learned the exact details of the resulting carnage through court depositions and public police records. When Bradley realized I was truly gone and his credit cards were entirely useless, he panicked. He attempted to shove past the security guards to escape the $28,000 invoice. Mr. Harrison, the event manager, immediately dialed emergency services. The police arrived within 10 minutes, with their red and blue lights flashing against the pristine white columns of the Oakmont. They found my soon-to-be ex-husband screaming at the staff, demanding that my parents pay the bill. But Gregory, furious at the public humiliation and suddenly terrified of his own financial exposure, refused to open his wallet. The officers placed Bradley in handcuffs right there in the grand foyer. He was paraded through the majestic oak doors in his wrinkled, bespoke suit, while wealthy patrons recorded the entire humiliating spectacle on their phones. Bradley was booked into the county jail for felony theft of services. He spent the entire weekend sitting in a concrete holding cell because his accounts were frozen and his arrogant pride had alienated the only people who could have posted his bail. Desmond acted with the clinical, ruthless precision of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. He did not waste a single second arguing with Penelope. He carried a sleeping Leo out of the country club, strapped him into his car, and drove directly to a secure hotel. He left Penelope stranded at the venue, without a ride, without her son, and without a future. First thing Monday morning, Desmond hired a notoriously aggressive family law attorney. Penelope was served with emergency eviction papers from their marital home. Because her name was not on the deed, and Desmond had incontrovertible proof of her deceit, the judge granted him exclusive occupancy. Penelope was forced to pack her designer clothes into garbage bags, while a police officer stood by watching her every move. Desmond did not stop at a simple divorce. He filed a massive civil lawsuit against Bradley and Penelope for paternity fraud and intentional infliction of emotional distress. He demanded total financial restitution for every single dollar he had spent raising a child that was conceived through their malicious deception. He also filed for primary physical custody of Leo. Desmond argued successfully that Penelope was morally bankrupt, financially unstable, and an unfit mother who had prioritized an affair over her child's well-being. The court, recognizing Desmond as the only stable psychological parent the boy had ever known, granted his emergency petition. Penelope was stripped of everything: her home, her husband, her financial security, and her pristine public image. Her social media accounts, where she had played the perfect mother, were flooded with mocking comments until she was forced to delete them entirely. She moved back into my parents' guest bedroom, an absolute failure with zero prospects. My parents quickly discovered that their wealth could not shield them from the catastrophic social fallout. The country club gossip network operated with lethal efficiency. By Monday evening, everyone in their elite social circle knew that Diane and Gregory had actively covered up their daughter's affair and allowed a respected pediatric surgeon to be horribly deceived. The backlash was swift and utterly devastating. The Oakmont Board of Directors held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to revoke my parents' membership, citing the police incident and the egregious breach of moral conduct. Diane attempted to attend her weekly charity luncheon on Tuesday afternoon, only to be stopped at the entrance by the event coordinator. The coordinator politely but firmly informed Diane that her seat had been given to someone else and her presence was no longer welcome. She was iced out of every gala, every fundraiser, and every social committee she had spent decades clawing her way into. She became an absolute pariah in the community, a woman toxic by association. Her so-called friends blocked her phone number and refused to acknowledge her in public. Gregory faced a complete professional demolition. He had relied heavily on his social connections to secure massive commercial real estate contracts. Desmond, who was beloved by the hospital administration, quietly informed the executive board about Gregory's complicity in the fraud. The hospital immediately pulled out of a multi-million-dollar expansion project they had been negotiating with Gregory's firm. Furthermore, Richard Caldwell viewed my parents' actions as a massive ethical liability. He advised the senior partners at my accounting firm to sever all business ties with Gregory's development company. Gregory lost his biggest clients in a matter of days. His business began to hemorrhage money, and his reputation in the financial district was utterly annihilated. As the weeks passed, the reality of their new existence settled in. Bradley was facing serious jail time for the unpaid country club bill and my ongoing financial fraud lawsuit. He was bankrupt, unemployable, and completely alone. Penelope was entirely dependent on my parents, drowning in legal fees from Desmond's lawsuits and facing a life devoid of the luxury she craved. My parents were trapped in a house that felt increasingly like a prison, surrounded by neighbors who despised them and a business community that refused to take their calls. They had chosen to protect a lie. They had chosen to sacrifice my sanity and my marriage for the sake of an artificial image. Now they were forced to live in the ashes of that very image, with no one to blame but themselves. 2 years have passed since the heavy oak doors of the Oakmont Country Club closed behind me. I am currently standing on the wraparound balcony of my new penthouse apartment, looking out over the glittering skyline of downtown Seattle. The floor-to-ceiling windows offer an unobstructed panoramic view of the harbor, a daily visual reminder that my horizons are no longer limited by anyone else's expectations. The air up here is crisp, clean, and entirely silent. There are no frantic phone calls demanding my credit card. There are no condescending lectures about my supposed failures. There is only the steady, quiet hum of a beautiful life I built entirely with my own 2 hands. The transition was not without its difficult moments, but the peace I gained was worth every single legal and emotional battle. My divorce from Bradley was finalized in record time. Thanks to the overwhelming evidence of his extreme financial fraud and the ironclad Asset Protection Trust, I established the family court judge showed him absolutely zero mercy. When Bradley sat across from me during the final settlement hearing, the arrogance had been completely wiped from his face. He looked haggard, panicked, and desperate. He tried to beg, leveraging the memory of our early years together, but I simply stared back at him with absolute indifference. He walked away with nothing but the clothes on his back and a mountain of legal debt. He was ordered by the court to repay the $40,000 he embezzled from our joint accounts. Given his unemployable status and his new felony record, I receive a meager wage garnishment check every single month. It is a tiny fraction of what he owes, but seeing that small deposit hit my banking app is a monthly reminder of my absolute victory. My career trajectory skyrocketed the exact moment I severed the dead weight from my life. Richard Caldwell, true to his word, evaluated my performance based strictly on my professional merit and unwavering integrity. I was officially named a senior partner at the accounting firm last spring. I now lead my own specialized division of forensic investigators focusing on high net worth asset concealment and corporate embezzlement. I teach younger accountants how to spot the exact same financial red flags that ultimately saved my own life. I transformed my personal nightmare into an impenetrable professional armor. My income has effectively doubled, and I purchased this penthouse in cash. I am financially, emotionally, and psychologically beholden to no one. As for my biological family, they exist only as a cautionary tale, a distant, fading memory of a life I no longer recognize. I changed my phone number, blocked their email addresses, and instructed my building's security to turn them away if they ever dared to show up. Through the bustling grapevine of the financial district, I occasionally hear updates about their miserable reality. Gregory and Diane were forced to sell their sprawling suburban estate at a massive loss just to cover their mounting legal fees and failing business ventures. They moved into a cramped, outdated apartment on the outskirts of the city. Penelope, living with them in that tiny space, works a minimum wage retail job, stripped of her designer clothes and her inflated ego. They are trapped in a toxic echo chamber of their own making, constantly blaming each other for their collective downfall. I feel no guilt. I feel no pity. I feel absolutely nothing at all for them. The only person from my past who remains in my life is Desmond. We are not close in the traditional sense, but we share a profound mutual respect born from surviving the same horrific battlefield. Desmond won full permanent physical and legal custody of Leo. Despite the lack of biological connection, Desmond is the only true father that little boy has ever known. The court recognized his unwavering dedication and prioritized the child's psychological stability over Penelope's fraudulent, manipulative claims. Desmond occasionally sends me an email with a photo of Leo thriving, happy, and completely shielded from the toxic influence of his mother's family. In his last message, Desmond simply wrote, "Thank you for giving me the truth. It saved my son's life." Standing here on my balcony, sipping a glass of truly excellent vintage wine, I realize that the greatest lie we are ever taught is that family is an unbreakable sacred bond. We are conditioned from childhood to believe that sharing DNA means we must tolerate disrespect, manipulation, and abuse. We are told to keep the peace, to swallow our pride, and to endlessly forgive people who have absolutely no intention of changing their toxic behavior. But blood does not equal loyalty. Blood does not give anyone a free pass to drain your finances, attack your mental health, or treat you like a disposable asset. True family is a verb. It is an action. It is found in the people who respect your boundaries, who celebrate your success without jealousy, and who protect your peace as fiercely as they protect their own. I have built a new inner circle of friends and colleagues who provide a warmth and support system that my biological relatives were fundamentally incapable of offering. I spent 34 years trying to earn a seat at a table where the game was entirely rigged against me. I exhausted myself trying to prove my worth to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. The moment I stopped fighting for their approval and started fighting for my own survival, my entire world shifted. I stopped seeing myself as the scapegoat and recognized myself as the powerhouse I always was. If you take anything away from my story, let it be this. Never let anyone convince you that standing up for yourself is an act of betrayal. Never apologize for protecting your assets, your career, or your sanity. Sometimes the most profitable investment you will ever make is aggressively cutting your losses on toxic relationships. You do not owe your abusers your loyalty simply because you share a last name. You owe yourself the beautiful, peaceful life that is waiting for you on the other side of their noise. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with toxic family members who viewed you as a resource rather than a person? How did you find the courage to walk away and build your own peace? Share your stories and experiences in the comments below. If my journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about claiming your power and setting unbreakable boundaries. Remember that your worth is non-negotiable and you always hold the key to your own freedom. The most profound lesson embedded in the story is the stark realization that biological ties do not excuse abuse, manipulation, or exploitation. Society often conditions us to believe that family must be preserved and protected at all costs, frequently at the direct expense of our own sanity, happiness, and financial security. However, this narrative completely shatters that dangerous myth. The true definition of family is rooted in mutual respect, unwavering support, and honest actions, not simply sharing a last name or a bloodline. When faced with the monumental betrayal orchestrated by her husband's sister and parents, the protagonist did not collapse into the expected role of the helpless victim. Instead, she actively chose herself. The journey powerfully illustrates that cutting ties with toxic individuals is never an act of malice or betrayal. It is a necessary, calculated measure for self-preservation. By meticulously protecting her hard-earned assets, maintaining her professional composure, and exposing the undeniable truth, she demonstrated that boundaries are not just invisible emotional walls. They are practical, actionable shields against those who view you as a disposable resource to fund their own vanity. Blood does not grant anyone a free pass to drain your finances, gaslight your reality, or attack your mental health. Ultimately, walking away from a profoundly toxic environment is the most profitable investment you can ever make in your own well-being. You do not owe your abusers your loyalty, your money, or your silence. The profound peace, career success, and authentic relationships waiting on the other side of a definitive boundary are entirely worth the temporary pain of severing those destructive ties. Evaluate the relationships in your own life today and find the courage to walk away from any table where respect is no longer being served.